Pasta Master. I almost called you Pasta Mosta. Unseen 2339. How's it going? We hope it gets delayed indefinitely. Are we still in that hate WoW phase? Is that what we're talking about here? Still hating WoW. Let's talk about that delay though. Now I saw kind of some split opinions about it. I see the overwhelming, obviously, perspective of these parts were unfinished, this was unbalanced, this part was much easier to level in regarding the different zones you choose in Shadowlands, aka the expansions. Some of the classes apparently not being balanced at all were some people's, big concerns. And then of course I see the players who are just like, oh, like these are just problems that people complain about and these aren't that big of a deal, and kind of rhetoric that basically goes around the whole idea of if it's kind of messed up, then just let it happen. They'll fix it, right? And I think that I'm actually glad that they delayed it. First off, I didn't see this coming. Not to say that I didn't see that they could delay it coming. Of course, right? It wasn't finished, but they've launched unfinished expansions many times. In fact, that seems to be almost the norm now, our audience. And yet in 2020, most recently, it looks like people had a couple of days ago, actually, like 4 days ago. It looks like people had enough. They were just like, nah, you know what? We've accepted it in the past, but we're not going to accept it this time. So I'm glad to see a lot of the community putting their foot down, but obviously there's still a lot of the whole just launch it anyway. I just want to play it, which is part of how we end up in these situations in the first place. I don't really have a whole lot of topics that I want to cover today, and as you can probably tell from looking at me, although I permanently look tired, thanks to genetics, I am pretty tired because I did my Anarchy Online script and voiceover yesterday, and yeah, that was about 29 minutes, and it was very pleasant actually. The story of Anarchy, I think, is one that is safe to say that gets overlooked. For example, Star Wars Galaxies is my favorite MMO, and that is my first sci-fi MMO that I played. When I look at a game like Anarchy Online, it's crazy to think that that came before Galaxy. In fact, it came about 2-3 years before. So some of the things that we give Galaxies credit for, and I've given Galaxies credit for, we actually kind of proactively have to give Anarchy Online credit for. And there's other things to give it credit for. For example, they had voice acting back in 2001, 2002. They had animated shorts to accompany their storylines, which was pretty crazy. Which was pretty crazy. I like the idea that you worked for 28 minutes and are still tired today. Yeah, it is a funny idea to think that I only worked 28 minutes. If a video only lasted 28 minutes, or a video only took 28 minutes, but I'd probably, I would say Anarchy Online took at least 5 days. At the very least, it took, I'd say like probably 24 hours. It seems like 24 hours usually is about how long it takes me to do one, but it depends on how long they are, usually. But one thing I'll say is doing a voiceover and then doing the editing after, that alone, that period can take sometimes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, and that is probably, personally, for many people too, at least from when I talk to content creators, that's probably one of the hardest parts of the job, because you have to listen to your voice over and over and over again. You have to make sure to make the right decisions regarding which segments to keep, which parts to cut out, what's the speed, a lot of that kind of stuff, how it sounds, which is constantly listening to yourself, which I do not really enjoy that much, actually. Contrary to popular belief, I don't enjoy listening to myself talk all the time. So yeah, when you're in like halfway, about an hour in, you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then like 2 hours in, you're just like, you know what? I'm actually like, I'm kind of getting to the end. But then like the 3 hours in, it like switches again. You're just like, maybe I shouldn't do this. And then like you finish it, and a lot of the time, and this is kind of just like with any artistic process, I'm sure many of you have experienced this. Near the end, and I've talked to other creators, as I mentioned, like Indigo Gaming about this, and you you basically you kind of realize that like when it comes to editing a video, by the end of the or any kind of art, I should say, again, not to keep making it specific, you don't really want to listen to yourself. You don't even want to watch your own video. And it's just funny to think because as much as you want to be your own hype man, be your own what's the word? I guess like marketer or something like that. Yeah, by the end of it, you're literally like, if someone had to like ask you to sell your video, my response would be like, and if you like this game or if you ever thought about it, like just go check it out. Like that'd be the enthusiasm I have. Meanwhile, like when I'm in the script or when I'm writing it or sometimes even voicing it, I'm very much into it, of course, because I'm thinking and feeling a lot of the things that I wrote and experienced and figured out, and maybe there's some little cool bits of information like an Anarchy Online. Realizing that they're more innovative than they get credit for, I think was made writing the script more enjoyable. But yeah, it's without a fail. I mean, there's been a couple of times where after I did it, I was like, you know what, this was a pretty good one. Like definitely Telltale was one of those. I think the most recent Mixer one, actually, even though it didn't do like a really good number, which obviously I need because this is my job, but from an artistic perspective, I was very actually the Telltale one as well. I was very proud of those two from like the art perspective, even though they didn't make me like the most money or whatever. You thought that that was the editor's job? Oh no, man. You'd have to pay an editor top dollar to get them to edit your voiceover. I personally don't know a lot of editors, video editors, I should specify, who edit voiceover. In fact, I would argue probably none of the ones that I know do that. And I think that there's a specific reason for that. It means that you have to get into production a little bit. And production is not the same as editing. Not the exact, like, there's similar elements to post-production, live production, pre-production, right? There's like elements that are kind of related. But generally speaking, for example, somebody who can do a recorded video is not going to be guaranteed to be good at live streaming, right? I feel like I'm a good example of that. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's different formats and different skills, and a lot of editors, in my experience, they're very, very good at the flow of things, and they're very good at like Tom, for example. I can gas Tom up, my editor, one of my editors. We have another editor who we're currently training, and he's been doing a good job as well and learning very quickly. That's Josiah, or Young Falcon. But Tom, which by Tom doesn't have a game name, at least that I know of. Tom came from a professional editing background, so he understands flow, he understands pacing, entertainment, how the video works. But even he, early on, I asked him, I was like, would you prefer if I edited my voiceovers versus like you editing them? And he was like, I'd prefer if you did it. And I was like, I don't blame you. Like, it I realized it in that moment. I don't want to listen to myself over and over again. Who the hell wants to listen to me over and over? I guess, like, you can always find somebody that's willing to do the job, right? But nobody's gonna know how my voice is supposed to sound better than me. Like, ultimately. I've made mistakes, definitely. But a lot of the times it's because I'm rushing. Because I have, at the end of the day, this is my business. But largely speaking, I'm pretty happy with doing them that way so far. How's it going, APOC? What's up, Akahara? What does Akahara stand for? Doesn't that mean something in Japanese? Speaking of Japanese, it's segue. As I was thinking, I was like, I've always wanted to do a learn stream. Like a stream where we learn together. But I thought, like, what do most people like to learn? Because as funny as that sounds, like, I am interested in two very specific categories, and not to say that I'm not interested in other things in life, but those kind of occupy the majority of my time and obsession rather, and that's going to be gaming and martial arts. So, if we want to have a stream where I explain the I don't know, the origins of martial arts or how they work and stuff. And don't get me wrong, in a couple of months I'll be moving into a house again, because I moved into an apartment to kind of downsize. We've been pretty expensive rent here, where I live in Austin, but living in a house, I'm going to have the space and the ability to set up a bag in my backyard, which will allow me to do some live streams where I can go out there and do some fitness and stuff that I think will be fun for you guys to watch and entertaining. But in terms of gaming, MMOs are obviously primarily what I'm interested in, and I noticed that a lot of the time when I talk about certain video games, I kind of realize that there's kind of two types of video gamers in my experience typically. There's the one who just plays what they like to play, and there's the ones who play whatever is fun to them. And sometimes those can kind of coincide, I guess. But what I mean is like there's the people who play the very specific kind of category of game they want to play, and maybe they only stick to that kind of game. And I would say that that was largely me for probably the vast majority of my life. But lately I find myself not being as like so strictly one game. Like I find myself sampling a lot more games these days. And part of it I know is like fun, it's variety, but part of it is just I feel like it helps me develop a bit more of the way I think about certain things. For example, you guys know on the stream I talked about it a couple of weeks ago that I didn't have that much history really in RTS games or turn-based strategy games. And in fact, I told you guys that the one that I pretty much grew up almost like exclusively playing was StarCraft, and then you throw Age of Empires mythology in there, but it was really just StarCraft. And I played StarCraft for probably no joke 11 years. Like don't ask me if I'm like the best player. I'm not. But I played it for such a long time because I had so much enjoyment from the game. There was so much that I could get out of it basically. But largely I hadn't really played these other kind of games that were out there on the market. Crusader Kings and Stronghold and Shogun and Total War, and I mean, you can tell I'm a noob because I don't even know all the names. Supreme Commander, Endless Legend, Sins of a Solar Empire, Stellaris, etc. Like I didn't really play a lot of those games, and so I kind of went on like a spree in the past like year playing a lot of those kinds of strategy games, and I kind of realized that I liked them a lot more than I realized. And so that's been a fun experience to kind of, especially like Crusader Kings right now, is one of those new games that I had recommended to me by a good friend, and I'm really happy because it's one of the most fun games I've played in a while, right? So like I would say that of course I might fall into the category of maybe just picking one kind of category, one kind of game, like a lot of you guys, I'm sure. But these days, I find myself a little bit more open. But maybe that would change if there's more MMOs in the space or more just multiplayer online games to kind of cover. I'm sure if that starts happening, then you guys are gonna suck me back into that kind of space because, like, if I could choose like a field to stay in and have endless like titles coming out and things to cover, of course it would be online games. Like that's what I'm the most interested in. That's why I'm interacting with you guys right now. Essentially, is I find this more enjoyable than I find playing by myself. And that's different because when I was younger, I appreciated the opposite more. And I think that came because I was very antisocial as a kid. You know, having social anxiety, PTSD, of course, leads to social anxiety and things like that. So I had a hard time like relating to people and talking with people. So it made more sense for me to be attracted to single player games. But when I was like 7 or 8, and I've told, of course, my story, and I will put it in a draw my thing or draw your story type video or whatever. At some point, I'm sure that's illustrated and all of that good jazz. But at that age, 7, 8, it's kind of when I discovered Dark Eden for the first time, and it was actually a friend of mine, Thomas. Shout out to Thomas, by the way, back in Houston. But Thomas, he was playing this game, and it was like you could be like a vampire or something like that. Like, and Ryan also, shout out to Ryan. You could, I don't know, you could be a vampire and run around and just like suck people's blood. And I was just like, whoa, this is like a kind of cool game, even without even knowing it was online. And then I started seeing players walking around, and it just like a light bulb just went off in my head, and I was just like, wait a minute, you're playing with other players? Like that's a thing. Like, isn't that so funny in like 2020 to hear that? Like you're playing with other players, but it's like back then I was like, that now that's that's 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I was asking the question of, you can play with other players? And then all of a sudden I jump into the game, and that game came out way later than or way earlier than I thought it did. I think the English version or translated version, it wasn't the English version. It was like broken English. But it was the translated version or the attempted translated version, maybe a fan patch or something like that. It was probably early 2000s, so like 2001, 2002, somewhere around there. But yeah, it's that was quite the experience. Once I discovered that, guys, single player games, like especially the ones where you could shoot people and fight and stuff like those kinds of games, I just couldn't cut it anymore. Like to me, it was just like, who cares? You're playing by yourself, like that kind of became like my thought process a lot of the time is, who cares? You're playing by yourself. Not to belittle single, I play games by myself all the time, but that was kind of my thought process when I started discovering these kinds of games. You do MMA. I'm a mixed martial artist. What do you train in? I train in jujitsu, but I've also been training in stand-up martial arts pretty much my whole life. Since I was 4, I think my dad put me in taekwondo for the first time, and then I did that for another like 10 years basically, and then I took like a 4-5 year break for sports basically in high school, and then after that I got back into martial arts again, but this time I couldn't find traditional martial arts really anymore, like karate or taekwondo, so I got into Muay Thai, and I did that, and I've been doing that, I should say, because it's probably I have more of like a mixed style now, as you guys will see when I hit the bag. But the Muay Thai really helped me learn like elbows and knees and clinching and things like that. And so I realized that I had a weakness in the clinch because I came from a style of fighting that was very long range. And so it's still my preferred way of fighting is kind of further away from my opponent. Obviously, I'm 6'5", like 79. I have like a super long entry reach, not up there with like John or Adesanya, but it's long reach. And so I had like a specific style, obviously. And whenever people would get close to me, and I noticed this when I started sparring against more MMA fighters, they'd punch a lot. And as funny as it sounds, I wasn't as used to punching. I came from a traditional martial art where you could only back fist each other. You couldn't punch each other. So you could only really like back fist each other. And so we would do that sometimes and hit each other, but largely it was kicking each other. And so I was okay with getting kicked and I could deal with that, but getting punched was different. It was faster. It was more visceral. You're right in front of somebody hitting you. And yeah, Muay Thai went on for, I did that for about 2 years, and now I haven't been training at a Muay Thai gym for the last 6 months. And that was actually because I injured my meniscus, which I'm doing much better now. Definitely isn't 100%, but I can still do a lot of the stuff that I used to be able to do, which is good. I'd like to learn how to get rich quick. Pasta, if you think I know that? If I knew that, I wouldn't ask for your guys' donations. Like, I would feel morally wronged if I was made of money and you guys would donate to me. Like, I know I can't stop you guys from doing that, like, especially if you, like, just want to support me. I understand that happens with, like, really popular streamers and shit. They get, like, thousands and thousands of dollars that they probably don't really need. But, like, I would feel kind of weird. I'm not the most moral person, but I would feel kind of weird. And I think Ashley Riot is right to a certain extent, and I know that from construction, working in construction. I've seen so many people taken advantage of, especially in lower paying jobs, and I worked those lower paying jobs, and I had to fight in those trenches before, so I know what that's like to go through that experience. But yeah, it's nice meme. No, if I knew how to get rich quick, I'd have studio, we'd have the whole thing set up, I'd have a camera crew. Come on, guys. We'd be building an empire right now. This is not where we would start or stop, right? We would keep going. We would try and make more content for you guys. That's just good business. Cold War, Cold War, espionage, samurai, paranormal stuff, and gaming are my favorite topics. Samurai are pretty awesome, though I think a lot of people aren't. So one thing I find, and we could talk about warriors actually sometime on stream. martial arts and all of that, because I find the study of warriors actually to be one of the most interesting things ever. My people, when I say my people, I mean like the heritage of my people on my dad's side is Aztec. So I have a very warlike and pretty crazy warlike tribe on that side. And then on my mom's side, my great great grandpa comes from Scotland, and that blood is Scottish. So yeah, needless to say, I've got a lot of crazy warrior blood in me, and so it could be possibly why I feel like I have so much energy I have to get out of me, and I've always felt that way since I was a kid. So my dad just never gave us a choice. He was basically like, "You have to do martial arts." Like part of it was the neighborhood we grew up in. We could get beat up, jumped, picked on. So my dad grew up in a far worse environment, growing up on the border of Mexico. So he had to deal with a lot more discrimination being mixed race versus me. I was in America, even though I was discriminated against. It was more of like, at the end of the day, I can still be white looking and I'm okay, right? But still, obviously, people were like, "You're not Hispanic enough." That kind of stuff would happen pretty regularly. But yeah. Anyway, um, I definitely think that talking about warriors and their background and how they like formed their thought process. For example, let's talk about the samurai just like temporarily. And this is, you could tell I'm very interested in this. The samurai, what made them extremely potent, not a samurai sword, was not armor, not a mask, it was the mythos, right? Like it was the legend of the samurai made the samurai so great. And what I mean by that is it basically comes down to, well, if you guys have ever read Miyamoto Musashi, I recommend you guys read that book. I think it's called the Five Rings, the Book of Five Rings. I recommend reading the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi if you guys are really interested in samurai lore or any kind of like warrior lore or trying to learn about that kind of stuff. I posted it in chat. I really, really, really recommend that. It's a fantastic book. It's kind of hard to decipher some parts, obviously, translations and many, many years of. I think it was written in like 1600s or some shit. So yeah, it's gonna be hard to decipher. But the reason the samurai were so effective was because of people like Musashi. Was the belief was they wore masks because they would scare their opponents. People were afraid of samurai, right? Like they were scary. Samurai were feared. But most importantly, samurai had something in their back pocket, something that made them stronger than any of the warriors that kind of had come before them. And I'm not going to say completely, but largely. It's a little bit of something called Shinto turning into Zen Buddhism. If you guys know about Shinto, that was the kind of religion before there was Buddhism in Japan, like the predominant religion. And then Zen Buddhism came into play. And Zen Buddhism, guys, is really, really, really what created Japan as some of the greatest warriors ever. And, I'm not the biggest religion person myself, but religion is very interesting, especially in the context of warriors. And needless to say, Zen Buddhism really helped samurai reach these kind of mythical levels of warrior, because Zen Buddhism, if any of you are familiar with it, it's kind of like this idea that you're basically not afraid of dying, right? It's almost like this, you've given up like the attachment of outcome. It's kind of like surrender yourself to the way of things, and so it's very much like living in the moment, like Valhalla, like esque in some respects, I guess you could say. Not necessarily like to die, you go to Valhalla, but like the idea of you know, glory and honor, having your sword and things like that. Obviously, very Japanese. See, you got me to rant about samurais, dude. Well, I should be happy because I don't really have any news to go over. It was a slow week / 2 weeks. The biggest news we had was Shadowlands being delayed, which, don't get me wrong, is huge news, but not much else to say about it other than I'm surprised that Blizzard, tucked their legs and actually admitted it. So maybe that's a good thing. How's it going, Ludens? Yeah, Adesanya's the man. Adesanya's probably my favorite fighter right now. I can't deny it. You do jujitsu and Muay Thai? Yeah, those are my favorites, and definitely the ones that I do right now. Since you're into that style of fighting, have you ever played or enjoyed Wuxia style MMO RPGs or MMORPGs? I haven't really, but I have to admit that there's two things that I'm going to rectify a lot on my channel, and these are actually kind of related in a lot of ways. Funny enough, and that's I want to have more Korean content, and I mean MMOs. I mean like Korean. I guess I should say news in regards to video games, that kind of stuff, and just more Korean coverage in general. And I want to have more coverage of fighting games. So those things can kind of be linked a lot of the times, but yeah, those are two things that I want to explore a lot more on my channel because obviously they're two things that I'm very interested in. Now, speaking of Korean, something that I was kind of getting into earlier, and you guys got me distracted with the damn samurai. Don't tell me historical warriors, okay? You guys are gonna get me totally like sidetracked. Now that's gonna become a meme. People are just gonna spam like Robert the Bruce or some shit. Like people are gonna spam like some Scottish name like in chat, and then I'm gonna be like, oh, did you know like da 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 da, or you know. Anyway, I've been going on a big Scottish craze lately to really read up on my history there, find out more about the MacGyvers and the Mackenzies and the people of my family ilk, if you will. But yeah, so to go back to kind of what I was talking about earlier before I got derailed into talking about some of the greatest warriors ever. I'm just gonna start another rant. It's scrolling back up just a minute. I didn't miss it before. Okay. Oh, we were talking about the learning stream. I was trying to see where we were. I wanted to actually, speaking of Korean, I'm in the process, if you guys have watched my Twitter at all, of trying to learn. I say try because language is not the skill that I could necessarily say is my greatest. My Spanglish gets me by, especially where I'm from. But when I've been in other places and I speak Spanish, people look at me like I'm like a caveman, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I know my Spanish is so crude, like it's like, you know, it sounds like a robot. Like I know it. But at the end of the day, hey, it gets me by, right? But so we talk about covering more Korean games and Korean MMO, and for many people here in the stream right now, you know why. Korea is the mecca of MMOs. They're right now putting out more MMOs, putting in more money than any other country. It's not even close, right? Like the amount of money in Korea behind MMOs, I think, is so much that we can't even comprehend as Westerners because we're just not really familiar with it. We're not really we don't know what that's like. Well, I've kind of realized like Steparu was a good channel actually. Like if you guys have ever watched Steparu on shout out to Steparu on YouTube. He or she, they have a channel that's based around playing Korean games basically because they are a Korean American who live there or something like that. That I can't remember, but they haven't been posting as much lately. And it's a cool idea, but they kind of just posted the gameplay, so it's not really explained. And don't get me wrong, I love just raw gameplay every now and then, but there's exactly in chat. Steparu had almost like a Korean MMO Monopoly, like okay, and so I thought like Steparu's idea of doing Korean MMOs. Oh, back since 3 months ago. Good to hear, Ashley Riot. Shout out to Steparu. But I was like, you know what? I want to do something like that. Like I want to make Korean MMO videos as well. But I don't want to just do it in like my broken ass English. You know, I don't want to do it in a disrespectful way. I don't want to do it in a way where I'm not paying attention to their culture, which matters. It does matter because while it's easy for us to say these games are just pay to win, in their culture, it's not seen that way. And I know that's hard for us to comprehend, but that's kind of why I'm trying to learn Korean and actually finish my degree in international business for Asia specifically, because I'm really interested in learning how the Asian market and specifically the Korean market works, because of course, that's our daddy market right now, right? If you're an MMO fan right now, whether you like it or not, your fate is somewhat tied to Korea, right? And I think this is like, it's been some interesting dialogue raised over the past couple of weeks. I follow somebody on Twitter who puts out I believe a yearly RPG book. I'm forgetting the name right now. Sorry about that. Don't take it personal. I have a horrible memory. I'm more of a sound person. I can mimic things, but I can't really remember what the hell was said. But I could do the voice. Anyway, he was talking about how there's Korean MMOs that have basically never gotten any credit for innovations they've done. And Dark Eden actually is a great one of that. It's basically lineage before lineage. It's almost like Diablo, the MMO, in 96 or 97. You know, like there's so many like hidden MMOs like this, like Nexus Kingdom Wars is a game that literally never gets talked about. It's a multiplayer online RPG slash MMO for the time that came out before Ultima. And it never gets talked about. So like there's a lot of games in Korea that historically have never been talked about. And yet there's games that are coming out almost like at this point monthly, quarterly over there that we don't even hear about for years. Listen to that. Years. It kind of like got to the point to where I realized a lot of I formed like a bitterness, like a resentment. And it's weird because I'm kind of weeby. Like, I'm a martial artist. I did Japanese and Korean martial arts. I know how to count a damn 10 in these, languages because I did martial arts in them, which is one of the most important things to do, is count to 10, all right? But you get what I'm saying? Like, I've engrossed myself into these cultures. I like them a lot. It's not I hate these cultures. And yet I found myself just not liking these games and not liking covering them. And why is that? And I realize it's partly because I'm looking at it from a Western context and a Western lens. But the other part is that I'm playing these games 3-4 years after they've already came out. So by the time we're covering them and talking about them in the West, they aren't cool anymore. Right? They're not even a big game anymore. And so I think that that's a big problem, actually. And I think that there's actually something that we could do about that. I believe we could push Korea to launch their games globally, which they've proven they can do, right? With Ion, with Blade and Soul, with other games. They've proven in the past that they can launch their Korean titles globally. They don't just have to launch them to only Korea and then do the whole Korea. Oh, I said Blade and Soul, but I forgot they still do the whole Korea gets the content first thing. Western market gets it later, which is technically not the same thing as I'm trying to imply, which is like just straight up release a global release everywhere. Korea is capable of doing that. Korea can do that. But if Korea knows that they can just relaunch the game 3-4 years later and everyone's going to just lap it up anyway, and you guys are going to be satisfied with a game that's 4 years outdated, I feel like that's kind of the problem, is we've been so like historically okay with them giving us their old games. I think that we should actually start pushing Korean developers to start having Western releases. And before it kind of became this thing we didn't think we can do. But I think that maybe I'm the guy to be the inside person here. I want to go to Korea. I even want to live in Korea for a year at the very least. And I'm talking like 2 years in the future from now. And I really want to get involved in their MMO scene. I want to meet the developers. I want to understand why they make the games the way they make them, why games are monetized the way they're monetized in Korea. And most importantly, I want to get in front of these people. And if I can be that person for us, then I'll do it. But I'll be the person to tell them, hey, can you release this in America too? Let me shittily translate it at least. Let me do the voice acting of like the storyline, like, in English. Oh no, I need you to come defend my land. There. See? I can do like shitty B acting. I got you guys. Like, put me on the front lines in Korea, all right? I'll get Korean MMOs launched in the West. I can do better voice acting than that. Please, none of my reels get leaked. Asmongold having millions of dollars in his bank account while living with his mom and living off of Hostess plus Wendy's. Yeah, I actually like Asmongold and his whole idea of his humble living. I really respect that, actually. Personally, it's very appealing to me. Big reason why I like Asian culture is because martial arts is a lot more readily accepted and more normal place. So when I go to Korea and I train there, for example, or I go to Japan and I go to the Kodokan and I go train there, it's not strange at all. People won't look at me weird because I'm dressed in a ceremonial garb or something, right? Because I'm wearing a gi. People won't think I'm strange because I'm doing drills at 9 a.m. and shrimping and and ki-ing and shit at the top of my lungs. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of the time, like in America, I've been looked at as like that's kind of weird to us because when I was in sports, it was cool. When I'm in martial arts in America, usually it's just people ignore me or stay the fuck away from me. They usually see me out in the park if I'm with my girlfriend and we're hitting pads or something, because I train with her and I obviously make sure she's very capable in self-defense, and she is. In fact, I'll go to far as to say that she'll definitely wash a lot of dudes. But anyway, we go out there and we train, and even people look at her like, oh, they're terrified because she can whack the pads a little bit. She can thump. You got to give her credit. The sad part is that isn't entirely inaccurate, talking about businesses making money off of less fortunate. Yeah, I think it's something that people have to kind of wake up to when they realize that like billionaires aren't like the video game or like Disney World, like Scrooge McDuck. It's not like this idea of like, oh, you just make so much money and then it's like, yeah, you have all the money. It's like actually most of the time those billionaires either come from severe generational wealth where they had like insane advantages over having like resources that we couldn't even possibly dream of having today, right? Or it's something more along the lines of they exploited people to get there. In a way that happens, if you want to hear an exact example, which I'm very familiar with, being Hispanic and working in construction for like 7-8 years, is people take advantage of illegal immigrants pretty much all the time. Now, that's kind of the ironic part to me about the whole hating of illegal immigrants. Should people come here illegally? No, right? But like the idea of hating them and then profiting off of them is kind of like you gotta choose one. You gotta choose one. Like you can't. I guess you could do both, but then you're just a massive hypocrite essentially. But they hire people who don't have papers because if that person wants to get a pay bump or something happens and the government wants more funding in this, blah, 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 they can just cut them and then they don't have to, in Texas, say why or really have a rhyme or a reason, and then they can't even apply for unemployment. So yeah, that kind of stuff happens pretty much all the time. I'm pretty familiar with it. So yes, people making money off of people to take advantage of them, of course that's the thing. Just like there's also companies out there, which hopefully you guys can say, hey, I'm in a company like that, right? Like hopefully, or we're all fucked. I'm just kidding. But I'm sure everyone has been a part of a company or is part of a company now, where you actually have some pretty decent people there, and that's kind of why I prefer to have my own company. If I'm being honest, is like I work with right now, kind of only 3 other people, and the 3 other people we all get along. We all don't really like bring political discussions or anything too much about any of that kind of stuff. We don't really get into that kind of stuff. And if we do, we can handle it in a way where we're adults, basically. We can talk about it. And I think that's a big thing for me, especially like we have a lot of diversity on my team, which is something that I'm also proud of because forced diversity I can't stand because I believe in meritocracies as problematic as they can be. But diversity because we came from those circumstances. Now that's what I like. You gave me a stonk. I felt bad taking away my $10 Patreon to the lowest one until I'm able to afford it. I don't feel bad if you guys do that. Like, I understand that people don't have money, they're not made of money, and don't necessarily come from wealth because I'm that way myself. So I never really ask for money. In fact, like this stream, I should do it right now, my first time of the stream. If you have a Twitch Prime subscription, you can use it on me. Like that's the extent of kind of how far I go. You know what I'm saying? And it's not necessarily because I don't want to make money. It's just because my problem in life is it's not really what I'm interested in. So I've been trying to improve that. Hence why, as we talked about before I went on my trip, we're shooting for 2 Death of a Games a month, which we will be hitting, I promise you guys. Anarchy Online this month, followed by, since you guys are here, Anthem. I'm finally going to cover Anthem. I gave Bioware plenty of time. It's been like 8 months since their last update, like serious update. So I'm like, okay, at this point, you guys are just like going to put out some haphazard like reboot. I don't really believe it's going to be a reboot. I'm gonna say I think it's gonna. Book of Five Rings is a great ring. Thank for the 100-bit donation, APOC. Here's your tip. For your tip. Hard to find other good books or even stories about samurai without digging through the most popular. Yeah, exactly. And in fact, many stories about samurai, of course, just like about Vikings, which the funny thing about Vikings I realized is, and I've been learning about them as well because obviously Scottish people have roots from the Vikings, especially my people who are from Ross County Shire, which is yeah, let's say a couple of different groups of Scandinavians have visited there at some point, and even they thought we were crazy, the Scots. But anyway, I've been looking into the history regarding the Scots and that kind of stuff there, and I think when it comes to learning about stuff like that, it's more exciting to create a mythos about it. And so the mythos got created about samurai, just like the mythos gets created about Scots being crazy barbarians, right? Or the Germanic tribes. I know I have some Germanic people here. Come on. My girlfriend is, she's got Germanic tribe blood, and my uncle lives in right now, so we've got some ties there. But anyway, that also was a group that got called barbarians. Were they really barbarians? Like, so to go back to the point about Scandinavians, what's interesting about things like the term Viking, and I know I have some Scandinavians in chat now, they can corroborate, but the term Viking actually, Vik-ing, literally means verb of to go and Vike. You know what I'm saying? So it's like you're going to go pillage, go raid. That's what Viking means. It's someone who goes and does that. And yet the people of Scandinavia ended up getting called Vikings, which is kind of, if you think about history, why it's problematic when things aren't clear, because the entire group of Scandinavian people, which by the way was a lot of different groups of people, was a bunch of different cultures, and even like a couple of different religions, they're not all Vikings. like everyone who was ever in that region wasn't a Viking. You get what I'm saying? Like, anyway, like that's kind of one of those funny things about history where you're just like, I mean, a person who goes on a Viking is a sorry, I can't read that. Why is that chat so small and I have to scroll down and go read what it says? Oh, is a Vikinger. Thank you, Limpos, for providing the language context. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, no, when I found that out, I know that's probably like brain dead for you guys. It is not exactly the most different. Gotcha. Yeah. I know that that's probably not that weird for you guys. You're probably like, well, duh, not all of us could be Vikings because people had to take care of the homestead, obviously. Like, if you use your brain a little bit, then yeah, you kind of think about it. You're like, well, of course, not all of them could have been Vikings. They're not all just barbaric, because how did they even take care of the homestead? How did they create farm? How did they, you know what I'm saying? So, it's funny how history really, with mythos and the story of things, it really changes how you perceive things, even though history isn't exactly gonna back that up. The story is more exciting than the history sometimes. What actually was the problem is that Vikings included all of Scandinavia, or all Scandinavians, which meant that Norway and Denmark got mixed into one, even though we were strifing nations. Yeah, and that's actually the funny thing about Crusader Kings that you can tell right away, right when you're playing in that region, like Upland, or if you play as Finland, another one, Smallland. That's another one. They're crazy, man. They're always trying to kill me in that game. But yeah, you learn about first off the fact that tribes from that area, if you want to call them, were traveling to Scotland, what is now Scotland, for example, for many years. And life has been near Scotland and Orkney and that kind of area, intermingling from these different cultures actually for many years as well, back in like 1500 BC or some shit. Like, history there, it's so deep that I'm just like maybe like 5% of the way. That's crazy. Yeah, y'all did. And it's crazy, Limpos, because I'll show you guys a map. And I love this kind of shit, so I love to think about the origins of people and how people move and people collectively. Maybe I'm interested in MMOs, huh? You think? Yeah, I am. So check this out. I learned this about my people, and I thought it was pretty nuts. All right, so When I traced where my family was from in Scotland, they're from Ross County Shire, which is up here in the northern part, which, as many people know, is Viking territory. But anyway, and here's Orkney, by the way, where some of the earliest form of life is located. Or Orkney is one of the places here, I should say. Anyway, so you see, here's Inverness. Everyone knows, like, Inverness got castles and cool stuff there. There's Aberdeen. My family is actually from a town called Avok. So let's see if I can find it. Okay, so my ancestors owned the port Avok and married a Mackenzie, Sir Mackenzie, who discovered Canada, which is kind of cool. That's in my history. But guess where the Norwegian blood from my family comes from? And it does come from somewhere. Well, you literally just draw a straight, like, diagonal line, and look where you end up. Which is where my family is from, Bergen. So it's just funny to think, like, when you look back in history in the 15s, 16s, 1700s, I can literally track my family from going from Oslo to Bergen to then crossing the pond to going to, like, Avok and Inverness, and then they went from England to America. And so Mackenzie and that side of the family, they came over here and discovered Canada and chilled out there. I don't know any. I don't even know if I had family in Canada, by the way. Apparently I do. But the rest of the family, the Scottish family and the Norwegians, they actually all went here. And you'll know why when I zoom in. Yeah, okay. This is where they moved, which, by the way, has a very similar climate, right? It's super fucking cold. It snows all the damn time, and there's a bunch of water around. So yeah, they basically got together as groups. Norwegians and Scottish people got together as groups and came to Minnesota. Now, what's crazy about that to me is that, completely unrelated, my family lineage from Norway, Bergen, comes to Minnesota. My family lineage from Scotland comes to, at the time, I think it was Scotland at the time, came to Minnesota. They met, and then they had my great grandpa. So it's actually pretty cool. Like, when you look back at or great grandpa, sorry, you look back and you see that, it makes a lot of sense, especially when I look at how giant my great grandpa was. My giantness, being 6'5", my brother's giant too. It just runs in the family, and yeah, talking about random shit today. We're talking about history. All right, I missed a couple of messages, so I'm gonna scroll up and rapid fire these. I'm sorry, guys. Y'all know I'm like the most amateur streamer. I don't get that deep into warfare. I'm just all about the actual struggle. Gotcha. Like the physical aspects of it. I find religion interesting in the sense of how it influences people. So do I. In fact, that's what I'm most interested in religion myself. So I'm not a monotheistic believer. Sorry, guys. I like how samurai participate about the arts. It's interesting, and it follows my actual hobbies. Don't become a clickbait MMO channel that calls every Eastern online RPG an MMO. Yeah, I won't. In fact, I think I can explain to Koreans why we don't see it that way. I think they'll actually understand it. I really do. I'm not saying that they'll leave me or like, okay, we'll just listen to some random, American, but like, get my point. I think that they could at least see my perspective. Yeah, fighting games, Pin Zero. We're definitely going to be making a fighting game series at some point and covering more fighting games. It's a genre that I want to get more into, obviously, with my history of fighting. But I believe that there's a lot of utility in examining both of them. For example, I believe gamers are ahead of martial artists in a lot of ways, actually, surprisingly. Just like I believe, of course, martial artists and fighters are ahead of gamers. You know, I think there's things that both crowds could learn from each other. Soggy Socks says, Samurai are so interesting. They seem to have a lot of focus and drive, so I respect that. It's also kind of relevant since Ghost of Sushi came out very recently. That's a good point. I haven't heard that one yet, by the way, Ghost of Sushi. Yamamoto. Yeah, Yamamoto is definitely one of those names, huh? There's a lot of decent fighting games, but there's a fighting game in particular that's about to come out. You probably know the name of it, and I was talking to Josiah about it, and they told me about it, and I'm trying to think what's the name of it's not, is it Guilty Gear? It might be Guilty Gear. But they were telling me about how it's supposed to be like the next big thing, and if it does well, it could mean big things for the fighting game market as a whole. So I'm looking forward to that. Absolver is definitely a game that I'm going to cover. Korean MMO Monopoly. Yeah, I read that one earlier. It may not be viewed that way by them, but it really is pay to win. Yeah, because they didn't invent the definition of pay to win. Kind of see what I'm saying? Like, if by their own definition, if pay to win is acquiring, you know, any kind of advantage, I think that that's fair. But I don't think pay to win is something that we can just at this point say it's only one definition. We can say in the Western world we mean something by it. That means like if you buy something and it gives you power, that's pay to win. At least that's how it should be. You're actually impressed by how many long-standing MMOs they have over there? Yeah, I mean, some of their biggest breadwinners in Korea are old games, really old games. And that is a big part of the problem, Pin Zero, is a lot of those developers don't care about the American audience and the Western audience in general. So it's something that I think that actually can be rectified. I think if MMOs are going to become better, we need to make them more global and stop making them like this area is MMO versus this area is MMO versus this area is MMO. You know, like we have to compete against each other. MMOs are global anyway. Like we want them to be global. We want to be able to play with players massively, right? Isn't that the idea? We are like a starving dog that gets fed potatoes. Thanks, Yul, for the Twitch Prime subscription. That's 17 months, by the way. There's a couple more tips to come, I'm sure. We got a man on the inside. It's been 13 months. No way why I will let you travel to the weeb mecca. I thought Tokyo was the weeb capital of the world. Is it Seoul now? Have we changed cities? I couldn't live in Seoul, by the way. I'd have to live in like Shincheon, Yongin, um, Seongnam. Where else? I think there's like one more. I'm forgetting. Oh, Incheon or Incheon. Sorry. I would probably live in one of those areas. I wouldn't live in Seoul. Like, don't get me wrong, they're close to Seoul. They're probably like 30 minutes max, maybe 30 to an hour by train, by fucking super train. But yeah. I don't want to live too far from Seoul because the whole point of me going to Korea is to talk to developers. It's to get involved there. It's to meet with sponsors. It's to make content. You know, it's to vlog. It's like I'm there to for business reasons, not just to be like, yeah, I'm in Korea. Why wouldn't I want to be on the front lines in Korea? It looks like they've already kind of dealt with COVID pretty easily over there. I think I do want to be over there. And they're already back to training martial arts with no restrictions. Sounds like a paradise for me. Otaku Army Rice. Don't worry, we'll always think you're strange. I'm glad, man. I always need somebody in my chat to be thinking I'm strange so I can keep taking that title of being weird. Because I tell people I'm weird, but if nobody's going to call me weird anymore, then I might lose that title. And I like being weird. The classic nerd is 5 years behind chat. Exactly, Pin Zero, as I read this from being behind chat. Oh, wait, capitalism bad. Capitalism, best of the worst systems. Fight me. Did I talk about Genshin Impact? How's it going, Mauricio Game Dev, by the way? Did I talk about Genshin Impact? I have not talked about Genshin Impact. I'm not the most interested in mobile games, which is something I'm going to have to get over when I go to Korea. I know you guys are like looking at me like, you might need to like them then. No, I'll check out Genshin. I do have a Samsung Note. It's the 8 or whatever, so it's a very capable phone. I can play pretty much any game on it. So I need to start getting into playing. And I know you can play Genshin on PC as well, but like, I'm saying I do need to actually get into examining some of these mobile MMOs or mobile games, mobile multiplayer games, because I'm actually of the belief they're not even scratching the surface of what's possible yet. They're just using them for monetization right now. Not to pick on Koreans. I mean they as in the market. I actually think that the market as a whole is not fully utilizing phones as much as they could be for either like Pokemon Go / augmented reality purposes, which I've seen things like that, by the way. Things like creating your own like ant colony. I saw a game talking about that recently. That was pretty interesting. Based on augmented reality, the hive would be based in the world. That's kind of cool. I think that things like that, companion apps for games on PC, like for example, if I'm gonna have a game on PC, if I'm gonna come out with something on mobile, maybe I don't have to put the whole game out there, but maybe I just put out a companion app. Maybe you can put your friends list on there. Maybe you can play mini games, things like that to increase interactivity between the two platforms, make it less hard for people to accept the fact that a game is going to be eventually on that platform, even if it launched as a sequel or something. You get what I'm saying? Like more exposure is the solution. But the problem is that's the solution. Getting exposed to more of these games that have like gotcha mechanics, endurance mechanics, and make insane amounts of money and don't really care about the art or the quality of the game. Subjecting yourself to that doesn't sound like the right way to get a good game, right? But the problem is that's kind of where the market is right now. And sometimes the market is kind of doing what you want it to do, but not like fully. And you have to do your best at trying to push it into the right direction. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I think that MMOs or multiplayer games in general, online games, could and can work properly and not in a pay to win, boring way on the phone. But they don't largely operate that way yet. Lost Ark is probably the most modern ARPG we have available, which is kind of sad to say. Lost Ark is actually one that I'm really looking forward to trying. If you make sure they are treated poorly by the state, you can make more money off of them, which is why people make the most money out of them to push to worsen their situation. Thank you, Adric Liv, that time subscription, 10 months. Here's your tip for a tip. Honestly, I could care less about the MMO aspect of Lost Ark. I just want a new ARPG. Fair enough. Aren't they coming out with some new ones over there? I respect Asmongold in the manner that he lives well within his means. Too many people I know, get a raise and go out and buy a new car, although their old one works fine. If cars are really your thing, I could understand it. But if you're just using it for transportation, then yeah, maybe you don't need a car. I love Anthem, but it's truly dead. I'm glad that you feel that way. 2 Death of a Games a month. Yeah, it's gonna happen, I promise you guys. Anthem's coming after this Anarchy Online one, which I believe is probably like a week away. What would Bioware have to do to pick up Anthem and turn it into something great? That's a good question, Soggy Socks. Obviously not something that I can answer in like short amount of time, but I'd say like to put it in as few words as I can. At this point, I think it would have to get back to what you captured with that initial trailer. You know, like when you go back to the crux of it all. Like when did we fall in love with Anthem? Is when we first saw that trailer and it's like flying around and like how can we go back to that? Because honestly, I think people struggle with the idea of opening up your game after it's already been closed off. And when I mean people, I mean everyone, like developers, players. It's very hard to do that. It's very hard to close your game off. Like, for example, Final Fantasy XIV is not an open-ended game. It's not an open world game, right? Do you guys feel the same feeling you get when you traverse a world on like Anarchy, for example, or like Asheron's Call or Darkfall that you get in Final Fantasy XIV? No, because those are open worlds, right? Those are like persistent open worlds. Now, if I wanted Final Fantasy XIV to become that now, they would have to do it in zones. Why would they actually retroactively go to their game, get rid of their instances, which is probably literally like the framework of their game, and player caps on these, and then get rid of all of that? You see what I'm saying? It's just like it doesn't have. You don't. To put it in technology terms, Mac is a closed system. PC is an open system. Mac doesn't let you get inside there and really mess around with things, whereas PC does. If Mac wants to retroactively allow you to do that, they basically kind of have to train people how to even mess with that stuff because they didn't let people do it anyway. You see what I'm saying? And so it's kind of like, at this point, what are you trying to accomplish with Anthem? If it was that open world, like fly around, like combat type of vibe that you were putting out there, do you have enough money, support, and assets already to pull off that kind of approach? If you don't, I say just drop that shit and go mission based and just try and make the missions fun and have cool story and make them fun to repeat. And I'm not gonna say that that's gonna work magically. I'm not. It's not like I can fix everything, right? I can just offer my best perspective and walk you guys through my arguments, but it's definitely gonna do a lot better than what they're doing right now. Oh, we traveled all over the place. What's funny about that, Limpos, is you weren't even talking about what I'm thinking in my head, and yet it's still true. Which is like my brain has traveled all over the place, and this conversation has traveled all over. I'm almost catching up though. Carlo Lucas, thank you for the Twitch Prime subscription. That's 13 months. No, that's a tier 1 subscription. It's just a tier 1, not a Twitch Prime. Thank you for the 13 months. Here you go. Okay, almost a year. Time flies by. It does. And thank you for the support. I appreciate it. There's a tip for a tip. We even set a place up in the Mediterranean. I have to ask my girlfriend about that. I wasn't aware of that. Boy, that pronunciation in Inverness. Yeah, I know. I actually would kind of love MMO with the Armored Core type of mech system. So would I. That would be pretty cool. Doesn't address rather how the heck you do an open world mech game. You know, as much as I would love to see that happen, boy, would that be hard. Here are the rest of my bits. I got nothing to say, so enjoy. Thanks, APOC. I appreciate the 300-bit donation. You think Genshin Impact is probably the closest thing we got to an open world MMO? Interesting. Absolver's not dead. It has 38 players right now. You the MVP, D-Rocks. I wonder how much money wealthy people spend on pay-to-win game traps. Well, I've seen some cases of how much they spend. It would shock you. Like, you're talking thousands of dollars. Like, I knew someone that spent, I think it was like 2 grand on a game. And that's nothing compared to the people who spend money on, like, mobile games. Like, I've read stories that when I've covered it, and you're talking like $19,000-$20,000 in like Clash of Clans and shit. You're just like, what? This money's insane. And I've even heard people talk about spending 30 grand before on these games, and I'm just like, mind you, that was a person who makes money, but still, I'm just like, damn. and yet people defend predatory monetization. I think what people have a hard time with in life is understanding the difference between supporting an idea, supporting a company, and supporting your own best interest. And what I will never ever understand is why there's people in the world, period, who ever completely vote against their own best interest. And that is a big thing, especially in America. It's like really weird. Like, yeah, you'll see that kind of stuff a lot, but globally you see it in terms of video games and how people defend, as mentioned, predatory monetization. Is they essentially will say like, well, it's not that expensive, or they have to make money, or come on, like it can't be free, or well, it's like you can still earn it in the game, so it's not completely pay to win. Like there's always something that kind of like is a defense mechanism, And maybe it's partly because they're the ones spending the money on the game, right? And so they feel kind of bought into it, sunk cost fallacy to a certain extent. It could also be they want to support their game. What I think the problem is for me is that, to go back to my previous point, is people don't understand the difference between supporting a game and the fact that you like the game and supporting the company, right? Like, let me reiterate that. There's a difference between supporting the game and wanting the game to do well and enjoying that experience with the game and wanting the company to do well. Sometimes they are very, very much related, right? The game does well, company does better, yay! But sometimes the company does well and the game doesn't really do better. And sometimes that's because of monetization. The company's doing well because they're making money, but player base or whoever is experiencing isn't necessarily enjoying it or isn't happy or satisfied with it. So I think that that's part of the problem is we form these and it's human nature to be tribalistic, but we form these like weird tribes over like MMOs where it's one thing to be like, this is my favorite game. It's one thing to be like, I only like this kind of game and this game's better than your game. Fair. It's another thing to be like, I believe that my game should be allowed to sell this kind of stuff, but shouldn't you just like hope your game fixes that instead? Yeah, but I mean, you don't have to buy it. It's like, so what is it? Is it you don't want them to do it, you don't support it, or you do, you just personally don't care? Well, it might be hard for you to, as a person, to understand why it matters to you, but you're playing a massive multiplayer online game, which means that if it affects them, it affects you. And I think that's a really hard thing as well for people to quite comprehend regarding MMOs. It's that if somebody else pay to wins, and I've gotten these arguments all the time in my comments, how does that affect me? Well, let me tell you how it does. It changes the progression of the game. It changes the speed at which you level. Think Dead Space 3, right? All that boring ass grinding they made you do because they wanted you to spend money on it. They control the experience. They control the rate. They control drop rates. Like, do I need to keep going? Do you see how like they can basically take advantage of you? Meanwhile, you think they're on your team or some shit? Like, they make the game that you like. That doesn't mean they like you, and it doesn't mean they care about you necessarily, right? So, if anything, if people are going to be militant about games, I at least appreciate that about like the Mario community, which, don't get me wrong, I can't completely relate to, and I'm not the biggest Mario fan, but I really like respect how Mario fans are like, don't you dare mess up our game, Nintendo, and they like yell at Nintendo and they get so angry at them. I respect that because I'm like, you guys care about Mario. You care about the game. You're not just like, Nintendo, woo! Like, there's not really a whole lot of Nintendo fans that are like that. Don't get me wrong, they exist. But a lot of people who like Nintendo like the games, right? And I'm sure they have a legion of fans that I'm just not as aware of. But you get my point. It's like, online MMOs almost become like these tribes, and more than a tribe, the players who play them become like the lackey henchmen for the game developers and the publishers, really. It's like, just because they make the game that you play or you enjoy doesn't mean you have to take their foot in your mouth, right? Doesn't mean you have to, unless it's your fetish, doesn't mean you have to suckle on their toes as well. It doesn't mean when they kick you in the ass, you have to thank them, right? I don't understand this kind of rhetoric. Like, if someone like smashes me in the face, I don't have to say thank you for doing that after, because at least I'm still alive and the game's still alive, right? It's like, well, no, like, that's the best of a worst, you know? The only thing I'd go to Seoul for is to burn those shipyards. Those bastards stole our wharfing industry. Ratskis, I did not. It's actually quite good for a mobile gacha game. Well, I like that you at least said that. I'm loving Eve Echoes. It's really changed my mind for what mobile MMOs might be. I mean, Eve and games like RuneScape are made for that. So are games like Lineage, which is doing amazing in Korea. So is Maple Story. Games like that that are more 2D centric, that aren't maybe so 3D big graphical like investments or requirements. I think that 2D and low poly, low res 3D games can find a haven on mobile for sure. I think it could even potentially bring games back from the death, like from the brink of death, I should say. Like dying titles could have mobile ports and somehow actually not be that bad. Like I think it's actually a real thing. I think it's possible. Doesn't mean I'm supporting every one of them though. Thanks for the Twitch Prime subscription, by the way. That's 10 months. I think I already said hi and tipping, all that kind of stuff. My brain is. Yeah, gacha games are definitely a business model, and they're a good one. One thing Anthem would really have to do is study the systems in existing looter shooters, not just try to reinvent the wheel and stumble in the same pitfalls. Giguk made a video about how much he spends in 3 gacha games. Really worth watching. Search for I spent $1,000 buying waifus in gacha games. I think I might have actually seen that video. But I'll double check. Monetization shapes design, especially in Korea. It's kind of the big like aha moment I had regarding ArcAge. Why the game has been historically so flawed. It's because it was designed that way, designed for monetization. Hey, didn't Fortnite try to militarize their player base against Apple, and didn't Disney militarize their fans to make a better deal with Sony? Yeah, I mean, definitely. Sounds like a thing. Unfortunately, it is a thing. Gotcha games and loot boxes. What's the difference? Well, there's actually a very technical difference. A loot box is when you purchase something that has the promise to essentially get you something. It's like a lottery. It's not much different than a lottery, right? But a gotcha game is very deliberate in what it does. Gotcha games especially are based around changing of currencies. The reason why changing currencies is so important is it kind of devalues in your mind how much a dollar costs or whatever your currency is. So whenever you switch your currency to something higher, the reason why it gives you 1,000 gold coins is because 1,000 gold coins seems like a lot, but it's still worth $1 or whatever. Worth a lot more than that probably. But you get my point. Like the amount that you're exchanging for it doesn't really have any worth. And so then how does gacha games really like? Why are they so addicting? Well, because the games themselves are based around the whole idea of collecting these, I guess, tokens or whatever they particularly use, prizes, tokens. Usually, they can't use money or things like that because it's illegal, especially in like Korea, Japan. But what they often do in Japan is basically just allow you to take those tokens, trade them in for something else at another store, and then get the money. So they've bypassed the illegal gotcha slash gambling laws by just kind of making you exchange your currency for another currency at another store. So I would say the gotcha is very much based around the idea that they want constant logins day by day, endurance mechanics that force you to either pay to bypass that progression, and which you will have to because it's designed that way if you want to get any kind of progress. And then they basically build the game around That being the addictive process, which is very addicting. It is addicting to collect things. We've all collected things, I'm sure, at one point of our life. And if the game is somewhat enjoyable as well, then that's just a cherry on top for some people. Some people that are collectors, for example, love gacha games, and I know some like that. I think that just because you like collecting doesn't mean you should support the model of the game, though. You could like that kind of collecting game. You don't have to like it because it steals your wallet or something, you know? Aren't gacha games just a form of loot box? I mean, I think if you're going to just try and do that, terminology kind of loses meaning. But I will agree in the sense that I guess in a sense you are taking a chance on what's randomly going to be given to you, and it is randomly drawn. But I think the main purpose is that in a game like Overwatch, for example, when I get my skin or when I get my loot box, there's chances to get my skins and emotes and sprays in there or whatever else. But whenever I'm playing like a game with a gacha system, it's more based around the currency than it is the skins. Like it's more based around exchanging the currency than it is exchanging the skin. Like when you play a gacha game, you're not playing the gacha game to wear skins. You know what I'm saying? Like you're playing Overwatch, you're playing the game, you just so happen to want a skin, so you take the chance to buy the skin in the loot box. But the gacha game is literally like it's designed to collect those things as part of the game. So to me, I think it's there's not a whole lot of gacha games that don't base their whole game around collecting. So like I think that they are very similar in what they do, and they're very lottery based. If you want to compare them to a lottery, I think they're very closely related. Because lotteries also do the whole raffle ticket thing, and you exchange it for a different currency, tokens, or some shit. Like, yeah, this kind of stuff has existed for a long time. In fact, I mentioned this in my microtransactions video that arcades are essentially pay to win, right? Like in many ways, like arcades are much like this. So why do you think Japan, Korea got so good at monetizing games? It's because they've been doing it and they kept doing it for a long time with arcades and things like that. Whereas those things just aren't nearly as effective or popular in America, partly because they just suck. That's just a fact. They just suck in America. We're using machines in America that at this point are like 10 years old, guys. Like I Google like arcades in Japan or Korea or like PC bongs, like you will be shocked at the shit that you see in these places. You'll see like mech assault like Gundam level arcade games and you're like, "What? That's a game? I can play that right now?" If I was in Korea or somewhere or Japan or in Asia? Yeah, you could. But good luck getting one of those imported to America, right? It's very, very rare to be able to play Japanese imported machines in America. I'm lucky that in Austin, I do have a retro place here. I can play some of those, but largely not. A lot of phone games are based on abusing how humans live around habits. As soon as opening the game every day for a bit becomes a habit, it's hard to just stop. That's a good point. NCSoft known for their very consumer and developer friendly policies. Yeah, exactly. You know what? I used to make a lot of jokes about Korean publishers. Now I'm just gonna try and not make those jokes. You guys know what I mean? Just kidding. See you later, Carlo. I appreciate you stopping by. An arcade in Japan. I think Tekken 7 was on arcades at least half a year before coming to consoles and PC. True, Salty. They had cabinets. Absolutely. They had arcade cabinets. Kostas the First. If that's a Kostas who's Greek, by the way, shout out. Sorry, I always assume Kostas is a Greek person. I'm probably gonna live in Greece. Oh, well, that's awesome, Kostas. My girlfriend is Greek, actually. Her grandma still has a house and property there, so it's our plan in the future to move and live there long term. But when I say like move and live there long term, they're going through the naturalization process right now. I don't know how long that will take, so sooner or later, I'll be an EU citizen though. And then Limpos can never get rid of it. Then I'll just come bother Limpos at his job. I wish I could say something in Greek, Kostas, but I can't, unfortunately. All I can say is that welcome to the channel in English. Speaking of fighting games and horrendous online play, Tekken 7 is a hecking hoax. Yeah, like seriously, what is it like? That's another thing. I want to go to Japan at some point too, and just like lock one of their engineers in a room and just say like, "Hey, is there a reason why like kid coders and like script kiddies are figuring out how to fix your netcode and you guys can't figure it out?" Like, I know latency is a big thing here and stuff and all that jazz, but can we like fix this like online play, please? What are they gonna do though if Pin Zero? What are they gonna do if like companies start moving to Korea? Like, what if like a big like fighting game company moved to Korea or like started making video games in Korea and they started doing well? Which I don't know if that's a thing. I don't know the fighting game scene in Korea as well. I know they have pro players in Korea, obviously, but I don't know how big their scene is. That's why the new Guilty Gear is a pretty big deal. Oh, because it has the potential to be big in all of Asia. I see. Interesting. You stay away, leave Europe alone. Yeah, I'll be there at some point. I'll probably visit most of Scandinavia, though I don't think I'll ever make it to those islands up north. Those are a little bit too far for me, and they look way too fucking cold. Even though I think that's so cool, especially places like near Orkney, in between that like the islands over there. I don't know what it's called, unfortunately, because I'm a dirty American. You guys think I look at a map? All I do is look at the map of the U.S. I can tell you where everything is in the U.S. That's about it. The Faroe Islands, yes, the Faroe Islands. Thank you. I can at least recognize the name. There are some bars that have a flat fee, and you can play all arcade games. I was actually able to beat Time Crisis. You really get to see how rigged the game is. Yeah, exactly, MR, DRBX. I covered that a little bit as well, and I think it's something that we accepted back then, hilariously, like with open arms. Like, these days, if somebody told you to put a couple of quarters in after you died on one of your lives, you'd be like, what the hell is this microtransaction? Meanwhile, I'd be sitting back there laughing and being like, your first arcade? Like, is this your first arcade? Because, like, I've literally spent, like, who knows how many damn quarters on these games. And Time Crisis took a lot of fucking quarters to beat, all right? Speaking of which, whenever I go to any of these arcades, I'm always, like, stoked to find somebody who's willing to play them with. I don't go with anybody. I've actually had people... Have you guys ever done that? Like, gone to an arcade and played Time Crisis with literally a stranger? I've done it before, but only because I could see that my stranger who was there was really good. I saw him playing before me, and so I remember I was like, hey, can I play with you? And he was like, sure. And I just like tagged in right as he was going, and next thing you know, I'm playing Time Crisis. Eastern devs kind of own the fighting game market, but they have notoriously bad netcode. Yeah, it's so weird, right? Not a whole lot to see if you aren't a biologist or geologist. I guess the view is nice, but it's a windy place. Gotcha. Yeah, the wind would be... Wind makes me cry, man. Like, when I've been in cold places, the cold is one thing. The wind is what I'm like, yeah. Like, I turn into a little, you know, girl. Cold. In the West, we have NRS, Mortal Kombat, and Killer Instinct, Microsoft, and a few indie games, Skullgirls and Them's Fighting Herds. Wait, is that the actual name of the game? Them's Fighting Herds? Them's Fighting Herds? Schoolgirl or Skullgirls and Them's Fighting Herds. Sorry, I don't know if I'm misreading that. Oh, it's actually called Them's Fighting Herds. Okay, there you go. My dad went there with his job. He was not pleased. Please, yikes. Yeah, that sucks. I know that they have like really lax laws about moving and living there. It's actually like something that I looked into a lot. It's like, where would I live the next couple of years of my life? Because I'm one of those people that like I plan pretty far ahead in my life, even if it seems like a pretty big goal. Because that's kind of basically how I've got here, right? How I've made it to 27 years of age of my life. But one of the goals that I have is basically within 2 years I'll be in Korea. But I probably won't stay longer than 2 years if I'm being honest. Like maybe even just one. Just because as cool as it is to be there, as much as I'll learn, as much as advantages I'll get, both monetarily, artistically, and well, in martial arts, I don't think I could live in that kind of environment for a super long time because it's not really like how I prefer to live. I prefer to have a house and to have property. Then I prefer to live in a apartment and be kind of hyper modernized, if that makes sense. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to greatly enjoy it as it increases my career and my vlogging and channel and, and my popularity and all of that. I'm going to definitely love the fact that Korea is the most connected country, wired, I should say. But no, I've already thought that in terms of long-term living, I just don't see myself living in Korea. I see myself living in probably Greece. We have ties there, as I mentioned, family there, property there that's actually not even being maintained currently. Someone's just kind of there, like maintaining it, who isn't even a part of the family. So they're literally going through like the process of that kind of stuff right now, of like how to deal with like passing down land and who's going to manage it and stuff like that. So that is actually a big reason why I've been like, well, shit, I'd love to live in Greece. I'd definitely live. Y'all need someone to take care of some property. I can go take care of a, a masonette or a villa or, whatever. But where it's located in Greece is actually very beautiful. It's Corinth, Corinthia area, I should say, which is very beautiful. Very to tell you guys kind of about my perspective and what I enjoy, which it seems like that kind of stream, so we can talk about it. Let me move this out of the way because we're just talking shit now. Clear my throat. Thank you. What kind of place would I prefer to live in? And I can tell you guys climate. Maybe that would kind of help you understand why I've talked about the places I've talked about. So, obviously, I'm, Mexican American. My family is from the border, Laredo. I'm very used to living in hot, kind of arid environments, but I actually much prefer to live as my family, and pretty much all of my family tree, which is kind of crazy to think about, they're all coastal, which is not crazy for human life because most human life kind of comes from water. But anyway, point being is like my family lineage is very coastal, and so my upbringing was very coastal as well. My Scottish family came from Minnesota down to Galveston area, Freeport it's called, which is the port down in near Houston, near Texas, that kind of area, right? Trying to describe it for people who don't know, sorry. And so they actually went down there. My great grandpa, who was by all accounts a genius, built his own lake house there, rather beach house there, and kind of lived there because they had family down there. There was a military base in Corpus. He was a commander in the Air Force, so he had to deal with that kind of stuff. Anyway, or sorry, in the Navy. I always get them confused because the Navy has an Air Force as well. You guys know. He operated carriers, which makes sense because that's the Navy's Air Force. Usually, I believe the carrier. That's their primary Air Force. But so he went down there in the Navy, yeah. And so, yep, he was down there in the Navy, and he stayed for family. Never went back up to Minnesota, even though my family actually still has property there. Still got Scottish blood up there somewhere, and Norwegian blood up there somewhere, living there in America. But the thing is like, we've always been very coastal. I grew up fishing, being near the water, the beach. I love being near the water, the breeze, the feeling of it. The air is nicer. So that's a big part of like, I have to live somewhere near the water. I could never, like where I live right now is the most landlocked I probably would ever live. And that's Austin. We have a lake here, we have water, but like I have to drive a good amount to get to the lake. Sorry, to get to the beach, which is way too much for me personally. Like I feel uncomfortable when I'm landlocked. I don't know why. I think it's literally just in my blood. Like something in my blood just tells me like, get to the water, like, or some shit, like, because like, yeah, I need to be near the coast for my own like health, basically. So when I think about where I would live, it has to be coastal, pretty much. There's no denying that. I have to be close enough to the water that I could get to the water. The U.S. military is so big, its Navy has an Air Force. Yeah, it's true. The funny thing is that every branch of the military technically has every branch of everything. Isn't that funny? Now obviously the Marines don't really count, but well, they count. Hoorah! I'm not trying to hate on you, Marine. My best friend's a Marine. I'm just saying like they don't count in the sense that you've got Army, which is like the ground troops. You got the Air Force, which is like the air troops. And you got the Navy, which is like the water, and then like the Marines are kind of over here, right? Like who've been super important historically. But we can use them as a comparison with the Army, which I know my friend's gonna hate me because they hate comparing the two together. But they're more like the Army in that respect. What's funny in the U.S. military is that every branch technically has everything. Yeah, so I forgot Huel actually has experience in this, being former military, and so I know he knows what I'm talking about. And I'm not shitting on the Marines. Don't hate me, Huel. I'm not shitting on. But yeah, that's actually a more nuanced point as you explained here. But yeah, actually, the Army has an Air Force. The Marines have an Air Force, aka the Navy. The Navy has an Air Force. The Marines have boats, and well, Navy. The Air Force has carriers and boats. The Army has boats, transportation. Right? It's weird, but it's almost like it's so true, Pinzero. Anybody who knows American military knows that there's like this weird like war between the different like branches, like Army versus Air Force versus Navy versus Marines. And that's why like you guys saw me stumbling on my words, is because I was trying to say that Marines and Army, I'm going to use them for comparison in this, but then I was like, shit, I shouldn't do that, because first off, people hate when you compare them, and second off, as Yul said, technically the Marines are a part of the Navy, which then also has their own Air Force. So it's America's a little bit complicated in that. Internal war, you mean the Air Force beating all the other branches and allowing them to exist? I mean, it's kind of true. It's kind of true. As a Marine, I hated the Army, some of the stories I could tell. And I mean, that's basically what my Marine friends have told me as well. So it just so happens that my Marine best friend that I mentioned for like 13 years, his brother is an officer, I believe like a lieutenant officer now, in the Army. So they have like this like, well, they used to. Now he works as a police officer, but they used to have this like rivalry of like who's better, you know. Totally not biased, since all the military members in my family is Air Force. I don't necessarily think it is biased anyway. I mean, think about it. Like we have robots that can fly around and blow people up in the sky. Like, yeah. I think the Air Force wins. Like, I don't know if we're gonna beat that. But I'm also biased as well because my family served in the Navy as pilots, basically. In fact, my great grandpa served as a flight commander, and actually participated in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which is the Pacific, one of the biggest. I think it is the biggest Pacific battle. But primarily, even though he fought in that battle, primarily he was a commander, which meant that he did not fight, like dogfighting all the time. You know, like he was teaching people how to fly, telling them what to do, that kind of stuff. As MMOs have taught me, flight is a very powerful tool. MMOs have taught me. That's hilarious. MMO with flight combat. Hey, I mean, that'd be awesome, man. Any type of crew combat. You guys know me. Like, if you see my grave tomorrow, tell them to engrave on my tomb. He really liked crew combat. You know what I'm saying? Like, put that on my grave, because like I'm okay with that being on my grave, because I love crew combat, because I love working with other people to accomplish a goal together and have fun, right? So like crew combat to me, whether you're on a ship, whether you're in a plane, whether you're in a submarine, whether you're in a raft, like I'm a fan of that kind of. I still wouldn't mind some Sea of Thieves NS. I know, and I should play some, especially because I believe that Sea of Thieves is really good for roleplay. And I'd like to do some more roleplay streams. I feel like those are kind of fun to watch, you know? I watch like GTA streams sometimes, like every now and then, and it seems like people really get into that roleplay stuff with GTA. So I wonder if they'd find that fun with something like Sea of Thieves, which is a great game to roleplay, and I think, personally. Not saying that everybody is roleplaying it, I think there's a lot of avenues for roleplay. What about crew cooking? Love it as well. I think Uncooked is a great game. Yeah, I'm having similar issues with my property in Costa Rica. I almost lost some property to a squatter right. So yeah, that's actually funny you mentioned that. We could talk about it off air some other time, but yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Is like they have someone right now maintaining the property who doesn't technically live there and like doesn't own the property. But the problem is that they kind of just been living there now, like taking care of the property, and now I don't really know how Greek laws work, and so we're thinking like, okay, so like, can we like tell this person to leave or like I don't know. Anyway, they're getting like a lawyer involved, all that good stuff. And I'm sure it'll get figured out. But to go back to like where would I live in the world? Let's pull open the map. I mean, shit. All right. So here's where I live, right? Smack dab in the middle of like Texas practically. And although I love Austin as a city, I hate being located centrally. I don't want to be stuck in here, you know? Like, to me that kind of sucks. Now, we can talk about areas in the map, like regions. Like, why not stay in North America, for example? Well, for me, North America doesn't help or change really anything about my cost of living, which is very expensive. It doesn't really change anything about my career opportunities unless I just move to California, but then I'd have to live very frugally there because of technology and the conventions there. Essentially, like living anywhere in Canada or United States doesn't necessarily put my career ahead in any way, shape, or form unless I choose to live in the most expensive places to live, which kind of don't really help my career. Now, you might ask, why don't I go to where my family is from, like in Mexico? Well, part of that is just because, unfortunately, Mexico is not a country that is set up for the type of living that I have, right? Like, for the type of life that I have, which is basically like a digital nomad, like expat kind of life where I can do everything from my own computer. I don't need to go to a workplace necessarily if I don't want to, unless I want to film things. I need really good internet and I need cheap living. And don't get me wrong, you can find places like that in Mexico, but then there's other things that come into consideration. For example, the crime in Mexico. I'm from a really bad area in Texas, and my family grew up in a horrible area in Laredo, one of the worst areas in the state, and one of the worst areas right there on the border of Nuevo Leon. But needless to say, I know what crime is like there. I know what the drug trade is like. I know what all those. I love my Mexican heritage. Love my family. Don't know if I feel comfortable yet with living in Mexico. Maybe it's sometime because it is getting much better. I've heard things are getting better, especially in certain cities. But I don't want to live in a tourist city. Like, I have zero interest in living in a tourist city. You know, like that's not the kind of life I want to live. Period. I'm just not much of a tourist. I'm not much of a. I want to be where everybody is. I just have my own desires, and my family has our desires. You know, my dog and my girlfriend, and our desires largely overlay, I guess. Like they line up nicely. And as much as I would love and probably at some point would look seriously into having property in Mexico, because my family is actually from Nuevo Leon, but then my great grandpa was born in Zacatecas, actually, which is deep in Mexico. It's actually where the Aztecs are from, and he was Aztec, so it makes sense. But I have actually considered living in South America. Now, I would choose South America over Mexico primarily because of internet access and because of crime rate. Now, again, sorry to my Mexican brothers. You know it's true. It's an unfortunate part of the history of our country, our ancestor country, because most of us are in America now for good reason, right? I mean, let's just stop there. If you are Mexican right now and you're watching this and you're in America, mic drop. Anyway, so South America, Brazil can have some problems in crime in certain areas as well, like Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, Belo Horizonte. Sorry, my pronunciation is horrible, but these words are very hard to pronounce. Belo Horizonte, and then Sao Paulo, and then Rio de Janeiro. There. I'm working on my Portuguese, guys. Don't count on it, though. I say os and boa and parabéns. That's the full extent of my Portuguese. But anyway, I've thought about South America. Now, where in South America Well, you can probably guess. I have to pick a place that has very good internet. And there's basically only 4 options. There's Colombia, there's Ecuador, there's Chile, and there's Argentina. Now, these 4 countries probably have the most internet access, I would argue, and have very affordable cost of living, especially for someone like me who doesn't make a lot of money, and is okay with not making a lot of money as long as I can live within my means. Yeah. And the one that I've seriously looked into the most is probably Colombia because, again, my girlfriend is Colombian Greek. She actually has family that is from Colombia, so she has history there. And that's kind of a big reason why I'm choosing some of these places. I'm not just picking random countries and being like, here you go. It's like we're picking countries that our family has had history in, has visited, currently lives in, or has property, in some way, shape, or form, basically. So Ecuador and Colombia. Now, why they're not like top on my list right now is Korea is number 1 on my list for business reasons. And then it's also educational reasons following that. But in terms of living after Korea, like would I move to Colombia or Ecuador, it's very possible actually that I could. But it depends on if I was an EU citizen at the time. If my EU citizenship goes through by that time, then I'm very likely just going to live in Greece. And I'll show you why in a second. So now that we go to Europe, right? This is where I want to live. So now that we're in Europe, cocaine is so 10 years ago. Portuguese, but all the talk in South America is Spanish. Exactly. No, I'll be good, right? They all speak the same language. Cocaine is 10 years ago. Chorizo is the real moneymaker. It's funny you say that because like I was in like a very American like white town in Colorado, and I was shocked to see that they had chorizo in their sausage section. Like I was like, my people, culture has permeated all the way. And I was just surprised because it didn't look like the kind of place I'd see chorizo at, is all I'm saying. The only drug I do is religion. I do a lot of drugs, but don't do drugs, kids. Only do drugs that help you. And no, I don't mean like help you for 5 minutes, as most jokes like to make. Chorizo is now all over. Chorizo is well, it can be pork or beef actually, but it's like a ground up kind of sausage. It's I mean it's yeah, I mean it's kind of the simplest way to describe it actually. A lot of the time Hispanics or people who enjoy chorizo, because it's not just for Hispanics, love eating it with like egg, because the way you make it is you can just mix it in there with the egg. You just throw it in there, maybe just throw it in on top of something that you're eating, like maybe like a bowl, a rice bowl or something. You can just throw some chorizo on top of it, and it's nice. Like most of the time people eat chorizo, they eat pork chorizo, but I don't really like to eat pork as much, just because like first off, it's not even like the best quality meat to eat in the first place. And second off, pigs are pretty damn smart comparably to like the majority of other animals people eat. And it's also just one of those weird animals that got eaten a lot, kind of like the octopus, that I'm just kind of like, were these really like the best options for us to eat? Or were these kind of just like, we ran out of options? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. That's always the vibes I've gotten with pigs and like octopus. They're both very smart and they're both kind of gross animals. Like, I don't really know if I want to eat those things, really. You know, like, calamari, you fry it and shit, okay, but, like, they ink and shit, like, all over the place. Like, pigs, like, are always in their shit. Like, yeah, it's like, eh. They are as smart as they're delicious. I guess it's opinion, then, because I don't really think they're worth the taste of pork, to me, is not worth the lack of quality of the meat as a protein and the intelligence of the animal. It's like a if it's a scale, to me the formula isn't worth it. I do not think pigs are surprisingly clean animals at all, and I've raised pigs. I've literally raised pigs. In fact, my sister is a grand champion pig raiser, which for those who don't know what that means, it means she raised the best pig in her entire area. So, yeah, sorry. I think maybe you're being like nuanced with, maybe you're trying to say they're not as dirty as like a cow or something, or like maybe not as dirty as something like that. Because don't get me wrong, if you don't take care of a cow's pin or a steer's pin, yeah, they're dirty as fuck. Like their shit is huge and it goes everywhere, and they don't care about it. They really don't. They'll sit in the shit, but like largely speaking, pigs, man, they don't care if it's dirty. They love when it's dirty. They get excited when it's dirty. Yeah, they don't call it cow pies for nothing. Exactly. But yeah, no, I have a lot of history actually with being around animals, ranches, and raising them. Maybe not as a ranch hand myself, but my family has always been involved in it. It just never was really personally interesting to me, like raising animals and the grand champion stuff. Like I respect people who go through a lot of effort because, like, my sister, for example, was a person who put a lot of work into it, really good at it, who walked the animals constantly, and like after it was showtime, which basically means like somebody's gonna buy the animal and then kill it and slaughter it and then divvy out the food, which is a real process I believe anyone who eats meat should go through personally. And if you are too squeamish, then you shouldn't eat meat. That's just my opinion. I believe it should only be for people who can stomach that kind of stuff, basically. And I mean the whole process. But anyway, so what happens is they purchase these animals, and usually they just donate them to people who need the food or money. And sometimes you can literally just go up to the people who buy these animals, who buy them as show animals just for show, literally for show and for plaques. And you can just say, hey, I'll buy that off of you for like super discounted. And they'll do it. Like my uncle one time went up to one of the champion steer people and bought like the meat off of him for like a couple $100. So yeah, it was like we had meat for months. You know, we lived like really well, basically. So that's kind of more of like the kind of living I prefer, is actually more like grassroots. I would much prefer me have to watch or see my animal slaughtered or have to kill it myself and live off of the land in that way than just go into a grocery store, pick up a big fat juicy steak that's probably very low quality, and the animal had horrible living conditions, very likely, which means that the meat is even lower quality, because that's the only meat I can afford, being a poor boy. Instead of having a life like that, I'd rather have one where I don't eat meat as much, but when I do eat it, I have to face basically the consequences and the lifestyle of such, which would be, for example, I've been fishing for pretty much my whole life, as long as I can remember. When I was like 4 or 5, they brought me to a catfish pond, and I cried because they wouldn't let me take the catfish home and eat it. So yeah, needless to say, some of us have a little bit different of a mentality regarding some of these things. And while I very much respect vegans, people who live in certain diets, like like my girlfriend does, don't hate me. She's like, I would say, pescatarian. So I respect these different kinds of diets and stuff like that. But I guess for me, it's more of like, like if I want to eat fish, what's the freshest way to eat a fish? To catch it, right? To me, it really is just that simple. Like, where do I get the most fresh, cheapest fish? From the ocean, from the lake, from the river, from the water. If there's water, you give me a pole with a stick, or you give me a stick with a fucking piece of rope on it, or a line, I can catch a fish eventually. Like, I'm not gonna say it's gonna be easy, but I'll catch a fish eventually. I've been, fishing for such a long time. Not the best, but I can catch some, which is all you need to be good enough at, right? So when you catch a fish for the first time, and I'm not sure how many of you have done that, and maybe many of you aren't interested in that, but just hear me out. It's very rewarding the first time you actually make your own fish. Like when you cook your own fish, when you gut it, you kill the fish, you gut it, you scale it, you do all of that kind of stuff. Is that the most enjoyable process? No. I remember one time we had to kill a shark that we caught. And no joke, guys, we probably hit this shark like 20 times in the head on the ground. I felt so bad. He was like I think he was a hammerhead. Motherfucker would not die, dude. I felt bad, but first off, he's a nuisance. He was killing the fish that we were trying to catch. And second off, we couldn't get rid of the guy. So we're sitting there hitting the dude, trying to kill the guy, and he would not die. So yeah, I still remember that to this day. It made me feel some kind of way. It made me feel a little bit soft, right? Because I felt the softness to think like, shit, usually we can kill these fish immediately. This guy, Not only could he not breathe, we had to slam his head over and over again to kill this guy because he would not die. He was so durable. And that was the first time that it made me feel like the emotion of it. Because I was like, ah, shit, man. I feel bad for this guy. Like, it's kind of why whenever I go out and catch fish, I prefer to leave my bait with me if I'm weight fishing or something. Versus like, putting it in a bag or because like, yeah, you can put water in a bag, you put water in a chest. But the fish aren't gonna live that well in that. They're half dead, like stuffed into this box, like half dying, and that's like so brutal. But whenever you catch them and you can attach them to your line, actually, you can just let them swim around kind of and fuck around while you're still going. And I actually like doing that a lot. That way, whenever I kill them, I actually have to kill them very quickly and, pretty much painlessly because they're not going to feel it. Versus just like torturing them until they die. Have you ever helped file down tusks then? Oh, you mean like on a boar? Because we have a serious boar problem here. Huge boar problem here. So much so that like we have to like literally eradicate them. Also, don't eat boar. I mean, you can, but like I don't recommend it. Boar, like my uncle one time got sick for like 2 weeks because he ate boar. And it was a boar that they caught themselves. So it wasn't like, again, like the grocery store, you don't know what quality food you're getting. Like, no, they had the boar and it was sick of all kinds, maggots, and yeah, they're not the best things to eat. Pigs are, in general, as a species, are kind of gross to eat, as I said. It's actually why a lot of, historical people, including religious sects and groups of people, haven't eaten it, actually. It's been because they've kind of always seen it as a very dirty thing to eat, and it is literally a dirty thing to eat. Support our salmon industries. Hey, man, I'm all about wild caught. If that's what you're talking about. Usually when we kill our meat, it's swift and painless. Yeah, usually. Well, depends. A lot of American beef and meat that's farm raised, for example, has very little standards, what's considered a farm and what's considered ethical. So many of the animals that you're eating in America pretty much are tortured. Like, that's just how it is. To give you an example, when I was visiting Mexico, you could literally see a goat or like a lamb in the back. Someone go back there, boom, boom, chop it up, gut it out, feed it to you right there. Pretty gross, pretty intense, huh? But damn good and how you're supposed to eat animals, right? Like, it's not supposed to be nice and kind and make you feel all warm and fuzzy. You just killed something. Like, it is a bit of a hardcore thing. Yeah, no, it's just join. What's this stuff about? Right now, we're talking about animals and eating things like that. But whenever you go to America, for example, chicken coops, there's certain laws, like for example, there's organic, pasture raised, like they have these names and terms, and some of those are legally protected, some of those aren't, which means that natural is not legally protected, which means you can say natural even if your shit natural. But organic has some protections, but they're not the end all be all. For example, if you say that your chickens graze, it could mean that you just basically let your chickens out one time, or your, coop was big enough for them to walk around in it, which isn't grazing, right? And so you might be asking, why do I, as a human who consume these animals and I'm so superior to them, care at all about these animals? I can actually make you care. It's logically you should care because the quality of the meat is actually better when the animal lives a stronger, healthier, more active lifestyle. So if a chicken's just going to sit on its ass all day, it's not going to taste as good as the chicken who works his ass off. That's just history. Science. We have so much shit to back that up, right? I've mentioned it before, but when an animal is under duress, just like a human, they release a certain toxin into their blood and basically makes their meat less quality. Feel free to look these studies up if you're curious. This is not at all strange to just one animal species either. So meaning, if you can give animals better lives, you can eat them better. That's my argument. It's always funny, like, people will hear me start off my arguments and they'll think that I'm a vegan or, oh, do you eat meat? Like, I get asked that, like, oh, do you eat meat? Like, because I'll make like these kinds of arguments. It's like, yeah, I just eat it what I believe to be the right way, like, I try and actually know where my animal comes from and how it was raised and how it was killed and shit. Like, it's easier said than done, especially in America. I realize some of you live in big ass cities and you don't have access to that kind of stuff. I have like some farm access here. Not that much, but I have some. For example, I can get eggs from a farm right next door pretty easily, as I can get any kind of milk, etc. like that, like pretty close by. But yeah, I think that's the biggest problem in America is people are so disconnected from the process of eating and killing meat and fish and things of that nature that they basically have no brain over either A, how it's in their worst interest to have big factories basically dominate the industry, because do you think they care about the quality? No. Why would a big factory care about the quality of something, right? And so that's kind of my problem with a lot of American meat eaters, is they're just very ignorant. So not to hate on any of you guys here. I love you guys. We're here to educate. I don't believe that if you didn't know before, you should somehow never know. But that's just the kind of shit that I like to talk about. The shit that I like to examine is, why do you eat meat? And if you do eat it, could you eat it after you killed an animal yourself? If the answer is no, should you really be eating meat? You know, like, so I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be elitist, but I'm just saying, like, if you are going to do it, you might as well embrace it. If you're trying to kind of like, la la la, animals don't die when I eat them. They just get old and then I eat them when they're old. It's like, no, you're killing those animals. Like, you gotta accept that. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion, and historically, there's been nothing wrong with that. Now, how we do that, I think we can all argue there's something wrong about that. Do stores sell boar? Actually, yeah. Depending on where you go, though. I would say like the most exotic thing you buy at stores here is going to be elk, though, and bison, which are two of my favorites. For like a wild game, really, really good. Boar is freaking delicious. Freaking delicious. Sorry, my brain is dying because I haven't had my food yet. I fast in the morning and yeah, words start stumbling when that happens. My cousin is from a hunter's family and he had one prepared for his wedding. It was heaven. While I think boar can be good, I'm sorry. You're telling me a duck wouldn't have been better? You know what I'm saying? Like a chicken? You're telling me even like a quail wouldn't have been better? You're telling me like fish wouldn't have been better? You're telling me, I don't know, a lamb wouldn't have been... Maybe it's preference, but I'd rather eat those other things. I tell you, stuff's traumatizing. They squall in such intense pain. Yeah, they do. You should hear any of these animals whenever they get tortured. It'll make anybody kind of squeam, even if you like eating them. Not some farms are bad, Pinzero. The vast majority of them are. America is run by corporate farms, basically. Like, the illusion that we're sold in the media and on advertisements is homegrown and from the farm. Yeah, if the farm is like 100,000 square feet and ran by like 700 workers. Like, is it really? It's from the farm. Nah, it's from a factory. Like, it's from a factory, not a farm. By the way, in places in South America, like Chile, they almost don't even have farm like meat there, period. So whenever I talk to my foreign friends, they usually are so weirded out by what I'm saying because they're like, what are you talking about? That's the only meat you get? What about the other meats? Like, is it that much more expensive? Yeah, it is. Huh. We don't even have like preserved whatever the fuck meat here. Or places will tell me we don't even have high fructose corn syrup here. And I'm just like, wait, you guys don't put a bunch of preservatives in your meat and leave it out? I thought that everyone did that. And then you start realizing, oh, it's because of the way our system works. Factories are dominating food production. Oh. It's probably why humans taste so bad. Pork is usually a centerpiece for a large gathering for my families. It makes sense in terms of like a special occasion. Isn't Brazil like a massive meat producer? They are. In fact, they might be one of the biggest. Just say I'm your gay partner. High fructose corn syrup is banned in the EU. I didn't know that, Kostas. Thanks for letting me know that. Oh man, I'm glad to go to Greece and be able to, experience the regular sugar and goat's milk and goat's cheese and cheese in general. I'm gonna have some goats. My plan, and when we move to Greece, which we're talking like 5-10 years, and I don't even know how far in the future it would be. But my plan is to have land actually, and that's what we were talking about now. We're all over the place. Regular. Yeah. Well, it depends on if you mean artificial or naturally added, or naturally occurring. Because naturally added would be kind of a meme unless you just added like a fruit, which people do. Like dates are practically just used as like glorified natural sugar. They're a lot of sugar though, so like don't be fooled by the dates, because don't get me wrong, you're allowed to have a decent amount of natural occurring sugar, but if you just eat a bunch of dates, you'll not only satisfy all of your natural sugar, you'll satisfy all of your regular sugar too, like the artificial sugar. So yeah, dates will fucking catch up on your ass. Ain't nothing regular about sugar beets. European food is also different because of all of the different laws per country. I guess that's a good point. For example, I'm from the Netherlands, where it's quite normal to have chicken filled with different stuffs and water. But I live in Poland, and here it is not allowed. And you notice that the food is going bad basically the third day, which is good. That is a really good point, Alex. And I think a lot of Americans aren't used to that. Because I've been told by Americans, damn, my bread went bad, or damn, my thing went bad. I'm like, it doesn't have all the preservatives in it. It's supposed to go bad. Why do you think it's not going bad? What do you think's in it? It's like, anyway, so Spain is a very beautiful country, as is Portugal. And these are countries that I would definitely live in. Now, the reason why I haven't really considered living there seriously, even though I have a Valencia flag literally behind, is because these two countries make it actually pretty difficult to live in. And specifically for people with careers like mine, freelancers / like digital nomad type, work from home type jobs. Spain has made it easier lately, but you still have to go through this whole process of it. And then at that point, it begs the question to me, why go through the process of going through that in Spain when I'm already going to have to go through all of that annoying process in Greece? You know what I'm saying? And so the only chance that you'll see me in Spain is because I haven't become an EU citizen yet. And I leave Korea, and I don't want to go back to the US yet. So I'm probably going to either go to somewhere here in the Balkan area, Greece being first on my list, second being like Albania, and then probably Bulgaria, and where is it? Czechia. And then over there, Czechia is kind of Balkans. And then in terms of Europe, you'll see me in Berlin, because that's where their art visas are. You'll see me Andorra. I would go to Andorra, the place I would go to. I don't know. That's probably it. I've got Czechia blood. I've got German family there, so that wouldn't be that lonely for me. My girlfriend was born in Germany, so we have that connection there as well. I have friends that have worked and lived in Switzerland, and they really liked it, and they also liked Germany and France. So yeah, probably. Anyway, Spain is a very beautiful place, but I would say some of their laws regarding visas and stuff for my type of career is problematic, because my type of career is I literally can't even get into certain countries. Like, I mean, I can get in, but I can't live there at all, because they don't have a visa for someone like me. Literally, the visa doesn't even exist, like, period. So in some places it does. For example, Czechia has a specific visa geared towards me. Just like, what's the other country that, just like Georgia. Where's Georgia? Why can't I see it? Dude, am I like blind? Why can't? Oh, is it just not showing it? Oh. Okay. Okay. I was trying to make sure why I couldn't see it. I didn't zoom out far enough. I'm stupid. Forgive my Americanness. Okay, and Cyprus is down here. Yeah, there we go. There's Georgia. I was like, dude, where the fuck is Georgia? So I would say Albania, Greece, and the furthest I would ever fucking go would probably be, I'm not even going to try to pronounce their capital. But Georgia has a lot of martial arts there, actually. That's probably the furthest east I would go. Let me see. Well, you guys know what I mean. Besides Asia. Yeah. So Georgia would be like the furthest east I would go. And then, let's see. So where I would live in Greece would either be Athens, obviously, because of internet access. My job basically means I have to live somewhere with really good internet and somewhere that's affordable. So I would either live here or live in this area. These areas are awesome. Like the whole Corinth area through Athens. This whole area is awesome. I've only been told stories about it, unfortunately, and seen pictures and videos, but I will visit soon. I just have to visit Korea first, and Korea's an expensive-ass trip, so got to get one out of the way before the other one. But yeah, Georgia's the furthest I would go. Damn it, I lost it again. There it is. Okay, maybe I'm not going to go to Georgia if I can't even find the damn country on the map, right? Sorry, Georgia. No offense. You're like really hard to find. Like, seriously. I knew where all the other countries were, but I, for some fucking reason, can't find you. Where in Europe otherwise? I don't know, you know? I love Scandinavia. I love what they stand for as well. But you guys have expensive ass living. And I don't really think that's somewhere for someone who works digitally like me and wants to make a business surrounding it. I don't really think I want to live in a place that I can't afford real estate when I need an office, I need a studio. You get what I'm saying? Like, to give you an example, like the rent difference in Norway compared to like, man, let's use Denmark since we have some Danes here. Like, what's Copenhagen cost of living versus Athens? I think you guys are gonna be shocked. I do this all the time, by the way, guys. I do this all the time. All right, I'm gonna do USD because I'm a dirty American. Sorry. Okay, so here we go. Cost of living comparison between Copenhagen and Athens. Now, the most important prices here are going to be rent prices because that's what I need to do to rent a house and also to rent a studio to operate my podcasts and all of my video work out of. So when I scroll down, let's check out what like a 3-bedroom would cost. A three bedroom in the city center in Copenhagen would cost $2,700. Feel free to corroborate with this, Limboss, if this is off. And then apartment 3-bedroom, $2,100 Copenhagen outside of the city center. So in Athens, you could get the same apartment in the city center for a whopping like, oh god, almost 4 times less. And then in outside of the city center, 3 times, right? You guys kind of see what I'm saying here? Your boy who works from home, who also wants to have an office someday, yeah, like, it's expensive for me to live in a, well, not to say that Copenhagen's the only place that the Danes have internet. As far as I know, Denmark is a very connected city, or a very connected country, as I'm sure Copenhagen might be the most connected because it's the capital. Usually that happens, but Uh, Not to say that there isn't internet access outside of those areas or anything like that. Athens, on the other hand, and Greece, that is the case. It's a country that's more spread out in some respects, and definitely still has a lot of kind of old towns and small towns and things like that. So in Greece, you kind of have to live near central places. So like you need to live near Athens, Corinth, Thesso. You need to live near or Thessa. Sorry, you need to live near. What else is on there? Somewhere in the Peloponnese, like South Peloponnese. Like you get what I'm saying. You kind of have to live near where everyone lives in order to get access to the really good internet that I need to stream and to make videos because it's my job. So I can't have bad internet. I can't move somewhere and have bad internet. You guys would hate me. I'd hate myself. I'd have to deal with it all the time. It would suck. Based on this site, Copenhagen costs pretty much the same as popular cities in the US. And that doesn't surprise me, Mr. DRBX. I'm curious where you guys live in terms of your rent. I can tell you if I type in Austin, it isn't that much different. In fact, that's why I want to move. It's a big reason why I want to leave this country, actually. It's very expensive to live in this country, especially when you don't want to live in the corporate environment that I lived in before. So right now in Austin, this is absolutely true. I pay $1,400 for a 2-bedroom outside the city center. So you think about this and the price, and yeah, it adds up basically. So I would be spending, to go back here, so since I'm a compulsive snipper, let's do some snipping. Get a 3-way comparison going. Boom. So you're kind of right. It's definitely comparable in the city center. It's more expensive even in the city center to live in Austin than to live in Copenhagen. Outside of the city center, it looks like it's a little bit cheaper to live in Austin than Copenhagen, and I'm not really sure why or how many. I'm not really sure based on how many, I guess, like houses this is based on or apartments or whatever else. Like, what's the data size or subset or whatever. But yeah, largely speaking, where I live, it is incredibly expensive. So expensive that I pay, when I move to Korea, I'll probably pay half of what I pay now. Not probably, 85% sure I'll pay half what I pay now. Mind you, is my place going to be bigger? No. In Korea, my place is actually going to be comparable, if not 100 to 200 square feet smaller. Now, what that does mean is I get a brand new apartment, which my apartment here is not brand new, and I also have better access to everything, including public transportation. Now, if I were to go to somewhere like Athens, what would I get with currently what I spend right now? I could get like a 4-bedroom house near the beach. Like, I know Athens is a kind of a bad example. Greece is a bad example because they recently had a market turn not that long ago and are kind of still coming out of that. But my point being is, as an American who gets paid from an American company, well, kind of, American company, I get paid online. I get paid through direct deposit. It means that as long as I'm working with the correct visa and, legally, that means like I have to have the correct paperwork, visa, work visa, all that kind of stuff. I can't just go somewhere and just work under a tourist visa and just keep staying there. That's illegal, right? Like, you have to actually go through the process of getting a visa, getting a work visa, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, to go work and live in a place like Greece would allow me to basically have a big office and a big house. While if I lived in Korea, I could have an office, but I would just have a smaller apartment. Meanwhile, in America, I can barely afford either. And I don't have much interest in moving to a small town here in America for internet purposes, for life purposes, quality of life, that is, and also just for personal interest. Dude, with American money, you can live like a king in Greece. Yeah, I didn't want to put it that way because, I do have Greek family and they went through a huge economic crisis. And I'm not trying to say that I'm delighting to take advantage of their market collapse, however many years back now. But yeah, needless to say, clearly that's a big reason why it's very beneficial for me to go not only create a house there, but create a business there. Because I can not only give back to the community, but they're giving me the ability to do that by allowing me to afford it, essentially, right? So anyway, I'd wager with American money you can live comfortably anywhere in Southern Europe. In the Balkans, yes, Dim, you're right. I've pretty much done like insane research about it, and I mean, no, not fucking that, motherfucker. I'm not trying to show you guys my porn collection. I'm trying to show you guys my expat collection. Porn collection, you'll have to earn that one. But so I'm not going to show you guys all of this because this is like some kind of like a little bit of private data. But as you can see, everyone's like screenshotting it. Nah, it's not private data. It's just like data that I took a lot of effort to get. Okay, and it took me a long time. Right, to be fair. But anyway, this is what I do. This is how my brain works. Whenever I think about somewhere to move, I think about like, okay, what will be the rent? What are the prices? What are the internet costs? How would you get a visa? What cities would you move to? For example, in Korea, I was looking at a bunch of cities. Is that for Patreon only? I heard something the other day that made me laugh. It was only man's. So someone was like, is weed legal because of medical purposes? Sorry, do you guys know that I smoke CBD, CBG, and weed? Whenever I can legally smoke THC, I should say, because where I'm at, you can only smoke it medically, not recreationally. Sorry, I thought everyone knew that already. Yeah, your boy is all kinds of messed up. You don't just get smart without any downsides. But anyway, subscribe to my only mans, please. What's funny about that, Elex, is Czech is actually I am Czech. That's the funny thing, is my dad's dad, actually, his family is literally Austrian Czech, split down the middle. His dad is half Czech, half Austrian. And so that basically makes my dad 25% Austrian, 25% Czech, 50% Mexican. It's like such a weird, like, interesting mix, right? But no, I have unfortunately, the records that I've traced to places like Austria and to well, Czechoslovakia, what used to be it, I should say. It's I think where my family was from maybe used to be a country. It might have got wiped out, if I'm being honest. So, yeah. I'm not really sure. Yeah, no, I'm like a weird mutt, dude. My dad's like 50% Mexican, 50% European. My mom is way more like American, I would say, but only by like 2 or 3 generations she's American. Meaning that 2 generations ago, pretty much all the family migrated from Scotland and Norway. So, yeah, and then of course my Hispanic family on my dad's side. So yeah, like I was gonna do a DNA test. My shit's gonna be weird. Like, I'm gonna be like 25% Hispanic, 10% Austrian, 10% Czech, 10%. You know, fucking Scott 10%. Like I'm gonna be like weird. My mixture is gonna be really weird. You get everything. Concrete coke. Is there like no drug laws in Czechia? Is that what you're trying to tell me or something? We don't mention Czechoslovakia. Yeah, sorry. What's sad is I think I told you the story already, Limpos, but I grew up with a guy who was from Yugoslavia. And little did I know he's from Yugoslavia and my family was from Czech. I didn't even put that together, but I remember I would talk to him and you bastards. Yeah. I'm not gonna rep them then, but because yeah, they were pretty they were pretty crazy back then. Speaking of Prussians, anyway, yeah, there's not a lot of records that go to Austria and Czechia, unfortunately, for me. Probably because there isn't any records, if I'm being honest. So I can't really trace my Germanic tribe blood or my are they Germanic? Like at that time, is that considered Germanic? I guess so. Pretty much everybody is at that time. I think that's considered Germanic. Yeah, it's I don't even know really about any of that history. So when I don't claim my Czech or my Austrian history, it's not because I hate those countries or I don't love it. It's because I don't have any family members. I don't know anybody who lives there. I don't have any history there. My family history isn't even that long in those countries. So yeah, if I had to tell somebody, the easiest way to put it would be Scottish Mexican heritage. That's the easiest way to put it. You could throw in a European in there. Scottish, European because it's broad, mainly Norwegian, but European and Mexican American and Germany. I wouldn't want to dig that part up either. Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. Elects though, it's actually a good point. I did put. It's funny. Look here. Look what's on my list. Prague. Brasilia, Brazil. So yeah, let's do this. Let's pull up my list. And again, you guys are not going to get that list, so don't get excited. All right, so let's see. We got Prague. I can find Prague. There it is. Now, the good thing about Prague, they have a visa specifically made for me. Like for YouTubers, for content creators, like literally for us. So it's like, how cool is it to have a country that supports my job? America doesn't. A lot of other countries don't. But Prague, well, Czechia, but Prague, the city specifically, really supports my kind of job, my kind of field. So Prague is on the list and one that I've looked at. The next one on the list, this is not in any order, is Brasilia, Brazil. I thought to myself, could I live in Brazil? The answer is yes. Then the question became, where? Probably the capital, Brasilia, which many people don't know is the capital because you think Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, or Rio de Janeiro, as they pronounce it. But Brasilia is actually the capital. That was a constructed city that they constructed on to bring people away from coastal areas, to kind of bring influence away from Portugal, who was dominating them at that time, because they were founded by Portugal, of course, and then the son, Pedro, good old Pedro II, ended up running Brazil. Anyway, Brasilia. Why, if you're wondering? Well, I gave you my reasons with Prague. It's cheap living in Prague, very, very much internet friendly, very supportive of my kind of career, very clean there, and yeah, relatively safe. Brasilia. The downsides would be I am in a country that now speaks Portuguese, not Spanish, so I can kind of understand, not really understand, which puts me in the same places like Prague or, many of these other countries, obviously. I don't know those languages either, and I don't know anybody that knows those languages. I don't know anybody that knows Czech, but I know people that know German. Girlfriend knows a little bit of German. I don't know people that know like Georgian and fucking Albanian and Estonian and shit like that. So those places, it would be very hard for me to integrate, which is always going to be a problem. But Portuguese wouldn't be very hard. It would be hard, not very hard. So Brasilia, probably on my list. The weather is not so amazing compared to others. If you want to have a fairly normal life without watching your back nonstop, you should choose Prague. Oh, sorry. Am I supposed to say Prague? What do you guys say these days? I'm a dirty American with Scottish blood. Like, we're literally designed to pronounce things incorrectly. Like, have you ever heard us speak? So yeah. Now I can use that as my excuse. Not my brain damage. The crime in Brazil scares me, though. The funny thing about that, which crime is never funny, is where I'm from in Houston, the crime rate is actually not that different from some of the better places in Brazil, which goes to show you how bad the crime rate is where I'm from. And how bad America is in a lot of places that people don't really know, I guess, because it's more modernized. But America has plenty of places with horrible crime rates. Houston's one of those. So if I moved to Brasilia, their crime rate would basically be like living in Houston. Not much different for me. Not saying that that's great to have to deal with that, but I'm just saying it's not that different from my kind of lifestyle. Brazil has a high cost of living, not by rent, but getting a flight ticket is quite expensive, and games and electronics too, apparently. Huh. Interesting. Officially, it's Paha, I believe, but the English... Well, how's that pronounced then? Prague? What's the crime, though? Violent crime versus other crime like auto theft or something? You mean like, what's the crime in Brazil? Or America? Well, I don't know about all of America, obviously, because it depends on what city, but where I'm from in Houston, it's we're like a homicide capital, man. I think our murder rate is like fuck, let me look it up. I think it's super high, though. Okay, so we're at 16.3 murders per 100K. 46th in the country in murder rate. But we're ranked 21st for most dangerous city. So violent crime isn't just automatically homicide. So homicide rate isn't nearly as high in America, and specifically Houston maybe, as it is in some third world countries. But the crime rate, the violent crime rate is still very high. Yeah, so like point being is, contrary to popular belief, especially if you're from where I'm from, there's actually a lot of crime in America. It's just it's either different kind of crime, like it's more about it's less like extreme, right? Like it's not going to be as extreme, clearly. Like, I mean, I think that's pretty fair to say. But it's not like there's no crime, you know? Yeah, console is over 1,000 in Brazil. Yikes. Prague? Ah, Prague. Thanks, mister. Central Europe is quite cool too, because flying to other countries is quite cheap. And I believe you only need one visa. Yeah, you do. You need the Schengen, and then you get access to Schengen countries. Or explains why you have such a large prison. Yeah, it actually does, on top of the fact that we incarcerate people for no reason as well. I mean, that's the other reason. But that's literally a whole other rant altogether. I'm not that much interested in talking about right now. All right, so where else? Well, Argentina, we mentioned that. Berlin, mentioned that. Berlin has a visa for artists, actually. Specifically for artists. You can apply for it. You have to have some level of notoriety. Luckily, I do. You have to have a portfolio. Luckily, I do. So I actually could live in Berlin, and their cost of living actually is like expensive in other ways, but their rent is not that expensive. And you can get furnished apartments for like $700-800, which is like much cheaper than what I pay right now. Furnished, you know, that's pretty impressive. So I would say that Berlin is definitely top on my list, especially because I have family in Germany already. So it's more appealing because I can have somebody co-sign for me. I can also have a place of residence at their place of residence if I needed to, if I was going to be moving places, like little things like that. Only internet in Germany is... Yeah, I haven't looked at the internet as much in Germany. From what I could see, let's see what my list... I didn't put that on the list yet. Shitty list, I guess. I didn't put the internet speeds. No reason or poor reason. It probably would be more of a combination of the two, though more so the latter. Weed takes precedence over weed takes precedence over the... Well, the good thing is in many of these countries, like even Korea, weed is legal medically, which means I'm okay. America has like draconic laws over medical usage, which means it's very hard for somebody like me to get usage in a state like Texas. So it's actually easier for me to use medical weed in European countries than it actually is in America. Just simply because I have access to countries that have full legality, and also countries that understand different health conditions for making it recreationally legal. America currently is stuck in the past, and the legislation, at least in Texas, is still only covering people who get seizures. There's more ways to have brain damage than get seizures, clearly. The only internet in Ireland. Why does Germany have bad internet? Shouldn't it be the opposite? I don't know. I really don't. I'll have to look into that, Dim. I'm not the most like well read on like the mid kind of centric European countries, if I'm being honest. It's only been recently I've been really studying into Scandinavian history, actually. So like just in general, like I'm slowly moving over to Czechia, Poland, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Slovakia, Switzerland, and learning more about those countries. You think it's medically allowed there? I didn't know that, Limboss, actually. Because yeah, I'm definitely gonna visit Scandinavia. I'm most interested in actually visiting Denmark, not just because I have homies there, but just because I feel like their community and the way that they approach things with video games is kind of, I don't know. I've always related to a lot of Danes in video games. I think that I would have a lot of fun in that sense. I know they have a lot of cafes there. But then I probably after Denmark would go to Norway because that's where my family's from. And that's probably where I would spend the majority of my time. So I might be more interested in visiting like a place like Denmark first, just because to me it's unique and it's more unique towards my interest, like video games. But I do think that Danes have a good sense of humor. But I'm not gonna sit here and start the whole Scandinavia war. I mean, you guys have already started that like 100,000 times. But not to hate on Danes, but you sound like English-speaking seals, and you should listen to Swedish people then. Swedish people always sound like they're asking you a question. Always asking you a question. Like, there's always a question to be asked. Danes are good at video games. It's true. What did you say about download versus price? Poland, Czech, Netherlands, Romania, other countries I know that have good internet, especially download versus the price. I hear that the foreigners the foreigners listen to me talking like a Korean already, because people in Asia say foreigner all the time, so it's like it's becoming a part of my lexicon. But I heard that the problem with Netherlands is that the people there aren't that accepting of people, and I should talk to Card because I actually have a friend that lives there, obviously. But I heard that they're not very accepting of foreigners. And the truth of the matter is, guys, if I'm gonna live in a country after Korea, and I just learned Korean, I'm probably gonna want to learn at least somewhat of the language, right? And so moving to a place where I don't know the language at all and have no one that knows the language or access to anyone that knows the language, then puts me into that position where I kind of have to be in an expat community, which is not what I'm going to be doing in Korea. Korea, I'm going to be integrating because I want to learn Korean and I'm going to be using it professionally. Did you just say, are you at least go to best Korea? Him will welcome you with open arms. The funny thing is that it's very beautiful near the border of North Korea, and there's a lot of good fishing there. I don't know if I'm gonna ever make a trek over there. I don't know. Like I saw people talking about there's actually like good fishing over here. I'm like, what's the consequence? You get like sent to the fucking DMV or some shit? Like I don't know if that's worth the fish. They leave you alone but aren't welcoming. That's what I know. That's what I know Card has said on the topic. And that's kind of what I was reading as well. It's like Lazy Peon used to live there in Netherlands, and I think he lived there for a girl, which maybe they're not together anymore. So like that makes sense, right? But like leaving there, he went to Thailand actually. A lot of YouTubers, as you guys can imagine, streamers as well, live abroad. And I don't know, like Netherlands, I think, But I live there long term and would I want to integrate? I don't know. Like they have kickboxing there. Don't get me wrong, I'd love the training there. in that sense. But jiu-jitsu scene is kind of non-existent there. The video game scene's okay. The cost of living isn't necessarily amazing. It's okay. So, yeah. Not high on my list, for sure. And then, yeah, I would say that those are probably my hardest hitting places. Oh, I forgot Estonia. Estonia is probably the closest I would go to being in Scandinavia. I know it's not Scandinavia. I know it's not part of that region. But it is a place that I've considered. Why have I considered Estonia? Seems random, right? It's because Estonia has a visa just for me. Like, it's literally Estonia. Let's see. Digital nomad visa. So check this out. Literally, Estonia has, this is their website, is set up to allow digital nomads to come and have visas and start work there and do the whole nine. They have good internet, low cost of living, and it's a really beautiful place. So that's basically like if you want to think about it like a college recruitment, that's kind of where I'm looking to live right now. Whichever country recruits me the best, that's where I'm going to go. And I mean that non-ironically. Like, if I meet with Estonia or I meet with fucking one of these places and like the representative really sells me on how the process works and the country and like the visa, then that's probably the one that's going to make me want to go there, you know? Is probably that. Because ultimately speaking, where I probably will die is probably going to be Greece. I think I want to have land and pass that land on in generations in Greece because we have, again, history and family there, and we don't want our Greek history to die out, basically. My girlfriend and I. Because obviously we're together. So we share history. So you'll probably see me die in somewhere like Greece. Beautiful water, gorgeous water, mountains, lush, like hiking, water, fishing. You can dive. Got clams and shit, mollusks. You got shit coming out the water you're eating. I mean, it's like a paradise for someone like me who loves to fish, eat, and loves history. And mythologies. I'm obsessed with mythology. I don't know if you guys know that either. It's a big reason why earlier when I joked about saying that I'm not a monotheistic person or monotheist, it's because I'm not. I'd rather much prefer something of the nature aspect of a multi-god mythological context or even historical context, that of like Norse mythology, that of like Greek mythology, obviously Gaelic mythology, Roman, etc. Those things are more interesting to me. Estonia's trying to steal our interneters. Granted, not much else attractive to go there for labor-wise. Yeah, I don't know much about like their other business opportunities there, but Estonia and Prague probably right now are the two best places to go in Europe as a digital nomad or someone who works at home, basically online. Yeah, digital nomad, I hate that term. It sounds so cheesy because nomad means you don't really live there and you're just moving all the time. But I like to think of more of I'm just temporary versus like I'm nomad, like I'm moving every 30 months, which is what a lot of nomads do. Like every 30 months, every 60, every 90, they just leave. After those two places, Estonia and Prague, it's probably Georgia and Albania, and that's because they specifically have started opening up visas for people like that as well, which is weird, right? Georgia and Albania, you don't expect them to, but that's why I mentioned Georgia and Albania. They have very Mediterranean roots, which means that I can relate to their cultures a lot better, and obviously my girlfriend will be, translating as best as she can, I should say. So yeah, Estonia is up there. Come to Czech and visit Poland so we can take a selfie and then leave because of COVID. You can live in Czech and play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and you'll have the same feeling. What's funny is I literally have it installed right now. So you're making me turn red. I feel like a fraud. Look, you guys see this icon right now? Oh shit. That was a good. And I haven't even beaten it yet. I need to play it more. Um I've just been too busy doing all of this research, if I'm being honest. I've been doing so much research on what the next 2 years is going to look like for me. And the next 2 years is basically going to be focusing on building my company so that I'm able to go abroad in 2 years, and then I'll go to Korea for a year or two, and then after that, I'm gonna pop over to Europe and stop by there somewhere for a couple of years before moving to Greece and probably living there long term before eventually having some kind of place to come back to in America. Because I do want to have a place back here. Maybe I'll just stay at my brother's or my dad's or something, but at least somewhere that I can come back to America and live. Yeah, I haven't played Odyssey yet, and I saw that they're working on Valhalla, so I need to work on both of those games. In fact, I should just start with Odyssey. You still planning for an internet cafe? So the internet cafe is actually a big reason why I'm going to Korea, and so is the studio thing. Put it this way: Korea is for my business, like first and foremost. Like the Korea trip and the Korea like escapade and all of that is for my business. Like I'm going there with a visa to set up a place of operations, like legitimately. That's my visa. It's literally, I'm going to have a base of operations, not a house, but an actual office. And I'm going to build a business. What that business is going to be, maybe it's just a studio. I just shoot videos there. Maybe I just live stream there. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm not against the idea of, especially if I have the ability to buy a business or get involved in a business using my name, my likeness, all that kind of stuff is very interesting to me as well. I would love to have a Korean ran, the Nerd Slayer Korean PC bong. That would be awesome for me. Even if I lived abroad, I could always travel back and visit. And in fact, that's actually what I'm probably going to do in Korea is travel a lot. So I'm not just going there for 2 years, grabbing all the information and data and then yoinking out after taking the opportunities, like a dirty American. Usually we do. But no, I'm going to be going back like pretty frequently. I would even say like probably as much as 4 times a year because I want to be making trips to Seoul either to check out my business interests, meet with people there, or constantly be in like putting myself back into the Korean market. That way I can know what's going on over there constantly. You know? And then one last trip to heaven. Any plan for kids in all of this? Man, right now we're probably like 6 years deep in my plan. I don't know if I see any kids in 6 years. Yeah, I don't know. It seems too soon, man. My business needs to be working and global, which is already hard to do. I need to have a place of residence across the globe, which is going to be hard to do. And yeah, it is a personal question, but I don't mind talking about it because my girlfriend and I don't mind talking about it. We're not going to have our own kid. We're going to be adopting. And it's a decision we came to for a number of reasons that are very personal to us, but to give you the 2 simplest ones, it's part of it is that I'm very, very afraid of what passes down in my family, mental health wise. Basically, if I were to have a kid with my girlfriend, our kid would almost guaranteed, based on our lineage, based on all the people in our family, would be smart and kind of crazy, I guess. You get what I'm saying? I don't know how much of it is based on your genetics. We don't, as people, know. So that kind of stuff does worry me a little bit because I have a lot of addiction issues, and part of that is caused from the abuse I suffered from my alcoholic mother who abandoned me, but part of it is also, I think, it passes down in my family. Like something passes down in my family. So yeah, I'm a little bit worried about that kind of stuff. I'm very afraid of having a kid and basically dooming them to that kind of stuff. So and then I asked myself for my second reason, do I need to have a kid? Like, does it need to be my blood? Does it need to be whatever other word people say? Like, The answer is truthfully speaking, it doesn't. And the reason being is that my brother is actually my half brother technically, right? Like my mother had him, guy disappeared as usual, in those kinds of stories. And my dad showed up and picked up the pieces. And I never consider my brother my half brother. I never call him that. But technically, he's literally my half brother. So, in the context of like with my brother, did I ever feel like the fact that we weren't 100% blood affected my relationship with him? No, no, not. I didn't even know that we weren't until much later in my life. So my point is that your family is kind of like it's blood, but it also can be who you choose. And what I'm trying to say is blood doesn't mean your family is going to be good, and it doesn't mean that you have to take everything your family throws at you just because they're your blood. I'm not one of those people. So bloodline, quote unquote, doesn't matter as much to me. Legacy, dynasty, those things matter a lot. So having a kid, it does mean something to me, and it means a lot. In fact, what like the undertaking would consist of would be massive, especially because I have such crazy standards for myself, let alone if I were to have a kid. But yeah, I would say that there's just plenty of kids in the world who don't have parents who could use a good parent to take care of them. Just like I'm sure there's dogs and other types of animals that could use adoptions as well. Like there are a lot of kids out there in the world who are up for adoption, and not all of them get picked. Some of them have to live in foster care, and that's a shitty life. So it's a bit personal in that sense. I was abandoned, ran away, went and lived with my dad. So I have a lot of like, I can relate to like people who grew up in foster care and people who grew up in like juvie kind of care where they don't have parents and stuff. And I would say like in a personal perspective, it's very much that. So as for what would they be, like kind of kid, it depends on the laws and the process of adopting a kid. So some countries are easier than others to adopt kids. For example, Korea is probably where we will get a kid, because we want more than one. But in terms of where else, I mean, it means a lot to us for our first kid, probably our first kid, I should say, to adopt somebody who is underprivileged and comes from a Hispanic background. So someone from South America, that means a lot to us. Obviously, we are both Hispanic. I come from a very poor background, so I can very much relate to that. And the culture difference and the language difference wouldn't be that different, right? I could teach them Spanish. They're fine. Would know some words, that kind of thing. Their culture would already be kind of similar to Spanish. It wouldn't be that, or it wouldn't be that different. And that's kind of what I was saying, Elex, is like, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to say like places make it illegal to adopt. Some make it illegal for foreigners. Some make it to where you have to like live there. Some make it to where you have to pay like ass loads of money. Some are just incredibly restrictive. But Korea is actually very open comparatively. And other Asian countries are open too. So I would, most likely, we're going to have a kid from South America, a kid from Asia, probably. It's probably how it would end up going. But then again, my girlfriend told me she doesn't want two. If she's like, I would want one or three. And I'm like, why one or three? Like, she's like, two just seems like a weird number. And I'm, all right. Guess I got to get to work. Blood relation is overrated. I agree. As long as it isn't your stepbrother. Oh god, Limposs, I missed that one. Not only are you saving a kid, you also save the world from overpopulating. Exactly. And that's, I'm sure if my girlfriend got on here, she could give you the more like ethical, like moralistic explanation for it that would make everyone go, "Aw." But yeah, I'm just like, I just want to like adopt kids who are in need and stuff. Like, I don't have like some big reasoning behind it. Just like I don't have some big reasoning behind I need something to be my bloodline. It doesn't need to be my bloodline. If I give you my last name, you're a part of my family. So you don't need to be whatever the fuck, like, specific bloodline for me. I will never get how we have foster care children, yet we adopt from Africa and Asia. I have the same exact perspective in America regarding giving countries money. Sorry. Like, I know that's like a controversial thing, but we have poverty all over America. It's rife with it. Again, where I'm from, it's all over the place, right? Like, I remember sitting in line to get our Medicare, Medicaid check, you know? Like, I remember seeing all the other people in line with me. Like, it was a normal thing, right? Like, not a lot of people have gone through those kinds of experiences. And yet, we're trying to give, like, a bunch of money to other countries, like, for their problems. Maybe we should stop messing with other countries and bothering other countries and just focus on helping the poor, dumb people here. Because, by the way, there's millions of them. Millions of them. Texas is one of the most uneducated states by far, right? So I don't need to bang that drum for my people. They should know that already. They probably don't. A two-faction system is hard to balance. Like, I like the joke, and then I hate it at the same time. You know, it's like it's one of those jokes where I'm just like, I hate you, dude. Like, I'm gonna start talking about the three-faction system to my girlfriend. Actually, we should just make everyone the same faction. One faction system. Fuck conflict. Well, normal people can afford 20,000 if they really want to. They absolutely can. Don't get me wrong, guys. 20,000 is a lot of money. I I barely even make that money in a year, kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, maybe a little bit over that in a year, right? Like, that being said, if I had the goal of having a child and adopting one, you bet your ass I'm going to find a way to make $20,000 if that's my goal, you know? So, like, it is a lot of money. And it should be a lot of money because it's not a simple process, in a sense. Not saying it should be. Take that back. It should be some money, meaning it should cost something. It should be difficult. It should be a process, right? It shouldn't everyone can just do it. But it shouldn't cost that much. I don't know, but it's however much it is, it's enough to where if you're dedicated to it, you'll do it. That's what I believe, at least. Our country is kind of the result of unchecked capitalism. We're here to serve the 1%. Yeah, America is the land for the great, as long as you can afford it. Yeah, hospital visits might be tax covered. All right, we definitely got to the point where we've had some interesting discussions. I think I can end the stream today. We've talked about a lot of crazy things. We've looked at visas, maps. What else did we look? Shadowlands. We talked a bit about that. We talked about samurais, cultures. Where the hell am I gonna live? Um, the Funcom Anarchy Online video should be out in another week or so. Talked about that. Uh, what else? That's probably all of the interesting stuff we talked about. The MMO podcast, exactly. So you give the birth to the kid, kind of comes with the delayed payment process. It's an investment, man. It's an investment. I'm just kidding. I hate when people like you can hate things and also like appreciate it at the same time. I hate that people have that mentality, but I also like it, at least from the perspective of you're gonna have a kid, you might as well try your hardest, right? Might as well. So if they end up paying you off in the end, doesn't that mean you kind of did a good job? You know what I'm saying? I'm just kidding. Oh, you mean delayed payment process? I'm talking about them paying me, man. Like, you gotta raise your kids well, so interrupting the stream. Anyway, it's a good time to stop. Oh, that I'm a bit weird about that. I think it's one of those things that when it comes to raising a kid, I don't really think there's one way of doing it. And I mean that like passionately. Like, I don't want someone to ever feel like because NS, some crazy, dude in America has this expectation of his kids that I should raise my kids this way, right? It's like everyone should raise their kids however they deem, necessary and fit and they believe to be the best way, most efficient way. I guess my point is, and this is where I don't argue and I can't find an argument against, is everyone's best interest should be taking care of their kid. And while that sounds weird, it is not everybody's best interest. I've seen it happen time and time again. My kids better visit me when I get old or they're going to get the belt. Yeah, that's going to guarantee they're never going to visit you. I don't like the idea of making people feel obligated to take care of me when I'm an old fart. I don't either, but I do like the idea of making them want to. Do you see the difference? I'll leave you guys with that little bit. There's a difference between your kids wanting to take care of you, like literally with every fiber of their being, versus feeling like they're obligated. Raising a kid is tough, man. Last 9 months went crazy, but also crazy fast. I bet, dude. Good luck, man. Kids are scary to me. One of my good friends, actually, he's here right now, over from the UK, and they're gonna raise their kid here for a bit, and then move back over whenever it's time for school. And yeah, just hearing and talking to him about the process has been the closest I've been to it. I'll say, like, hearing about what it's like and getting to like feel the baby and like, yeah, it's been different. The beating will continue until visits improve. Granted, Megan and Harry are your friends. I'm assuming those are characters I don't. Oh, I got it. It's like incredibly hilarious about that. And if my friend was watching right now, he would laugh. They actually don't look that different. Like literally, they don't look that different. His wife, a friend of mine as well, does kind of, I could see the Megan, and then Harry could definitely see it in my boy. So sorry guys, y'all are the royal wedding. No, they got married a couple of years ago, but they're about to have their kid in a month. That's so exciting, and they're raising him because it's a boy, as a martial artist already out the womb and an athlete. But that goes without saying because they're both like super athletes. But anyway, I'll see you guys later. It was nice talking to you guys. Really laid back, chill stream. Not trying to work too much on having some specific news item to get to. And the reason being because we have a news channel / news show series coming, actually. It's actually being worked on right now. Talked about it. Going to be doing it. But this is the month that this bad boy makes an appearance on the news show. So we're going to be doing a news show, as I've mentioned before. Going to be geared around online news, but of course cover MMOs. And that's going to be a produced YouTube show. So meaning it's not going to be live. It's going to be recorded and then uploaded, but it's going to be current events. So I'm going to be covering some current things. And I figured, I like being on here and stream and just like fuck around, talk about whatever I feel like talking about because that's what I want to do. I don't want to sit on here and talk about these topics when I either haven't had enough time to unpack them or there just simply isn't enough time to unpack them. And so I think that, instead of trying to make it some big produced podcast, which people do that, it's not for me. I figure I'm just going to keep my stream / podcast kind of the way it is now, which I like it like this. Talk about things seriously sometimes, bring people on sometimes. We kind of just do whatever we feel like doing as a community. And we should do more things like that. Which brings me to my next point, which I'm going to mention after this. But it's also, you mean like the news shows? Only men's, baby. Only men's coming. Our crown prince is a Navy SEAL. Oh, man, dude. Nothing makes me more hard than when I read that a person in political or government power is a capable, like, warrior and even, like, skilled, like, person. Like, it sounds cheesy, but it's like, seriously, like when I hear like as annoying and fucking dubious as Mr. Putin is, motherfucker can throw some people in judo. I gotta give him credit for that at least. I don't not Team Russia here, guys. There's not a Russian plant underneath this fedora. I promise. I'm not gonna pull it back because my hair's gonna be messed up and I have to show you guys that, but trust me. Yes, qualified to lead. I like how you put it so simply and it works. Yeah, I like being qualified for your job, you know? Jesus, we invented democracy to avoid this. No, the royal families are not per se skilled. It is actually a job they need to do for tax purposes. Dutch king is a pilot as well. Ah, interesting. Anyway, I have some cool time to show you guys me on the mountains. Up my battery. I was gonna upload some of this kind of stuff on. There's my dad. That was us in the fucking mountains, Colorado. It was really cool. I have some of those pictures and stuff on my Instagram, I believe. Yeah, see, look, here's me in a big ass, or on a big ass mountain, standing up like a giant. To be fair, I was on a giant rock. It does make me look like 7 million feet tall. Yeah, so I have some more shots like that. But the new show, it's going to be cool because it's going to be no longer than like 20-25 minutes, ever, pretty much. These super special scenarios. But largely speaking, it's going to be weekly and maybe even twice a week. And they're going to be regular uploads. So they're going to be uploaded the same day. At the same time, really just about. We're going to try to do the same time. Same time, you know, sorry, time zones, but it'll definitely be the same day. And if you guys are ever wondering about what my opinions are about certain news topics, or you have a news topic you'd like to share, maybe you want me to cover it, you would just email me or message me on Discord, or we'll have a section on Discord. You can post articles, and I'll cover and get to those things, and maybe even get to certain questions that I deem really important to get to. But that show will play more like to the point. I'll have my points, quantify them, I'll explain my position, then I'll move on. It's not going to be here where we can get stuck in the weeds and all that kind of cool stuff. See you later, Alex. Appreciate you stopping by. I met Harry in Afghanistan on Leatherneck. It was outside the pizza. The Pizza Hut. Y'all still about to install monarchy because a leader has some biceps. Oh, I see what you're saying. Funny. At this point, Limp Boss, man, we're like starved in America for like a capable leader. And you want to talk about just leading, being capable at leading? That's one thing. But how about like you lead the strongest military in the world? How about like be at least like able to defend yourself? You know, not to make this about the president in chief, but how the hell can you be the president in chief and command the strongest army and basically have no way or shape or how or any adjective you can possibly think of, like know how to defend yourself? Yeah, it's a bit weird. It makes America look weak as a whole, which is what, you know, obviously I'm not about. I mean, you don't. The end. The story's over. Anyway, for real, I'm saying goodbye this time. I wanted to tell you guys about that news show though, because you guys made me remember it. I think that one will be. I know people are kind of wanting that more to the point, like talk about these news topics kind of approach, and so we heard you guys. We're listening, and we're gonna definitely do that. Upgraded camera. I'm gonna turn this desk around, and I'm gonna make that back here, which is ghetto for right now, but I gotta do what I gotta do. I can't afford an office, and I don't really have a place I can set up shop at, so I'm gonna work with what I have right now. The army is an extension of the government to enforce diplomatic issues. It might be short-sighted, but when I see someone who is older and fit, I think they have some discipline. So do I, because it's easy to stop doing anything physical in your 20s especially. Like, no offense to the people in chat right now, and this is a big... I don't talk about this kind of stuff because I don't mean to, like, offend people in this respect. But in this, like, particular regard, I feel that way about a lot of college kids. When I look at college kids and they're still fit after they've, like, graduated kind of deal, like, so they're graduates or whatever, I'm usually like, oh, okay, so you actually care about your health to a certain extent. Because it's so easy at that point to just basically just not care. Just kind of let it go. And I think that a lot of young college kids realize the hard way that it doesn't take many years for your body to already start kind of saying like, I'm kind of shit now. Maybe it takes 1-2 years. It doesn't. For me, it took 2 years of not working out, which is the most I've ever done in my entire life of not working out or doing anything physical. Really, I should say, because I did like basketball every now and then, like some things, but not really. I did 2 years of like nothing. And let me tell you, those 2 years, I felt it. I was weak, I was skinny, I was tired all the time. I felt every bit of it. And maybe I'm just more sensitive to that stuff because I think about it all the time because I suffer from mental health issues. But yeah, people fit in their 25 to 30s. It is a rarity. It's kind of, again, you know, to go back to martial arts to a certain extent, it's kind of why I really appreciate martial arts, is I get to surround myself with people who are in really good shape. Not just in good shape. Some people are kind of meh shape, you know, maybe here and there. Most of the guys who are competing in the training sessions that I'm going to are in amazing shape. So there's something about when you're around those kinds of people, it rubs off on you. You know, it makes you want to work harder and want to keep it going. Oh man, Limp Boss. I wish I could show you my Facebook. Like I've deleted so many of like, and I barely use it, but I had so many friends on my Facebook who not just went from like skinny to fat, went from like jacked or like in shape, like really in shape, like football, Texas football in shape, to which is I don't know, that's crazy to me. Sorry. Personally, I could never live with myself if I completely let myself go. I would just kill myself. Like in a video game because I don't want to get in trouble on Twitch. But like, you get what I'm saying? Like, I wouldn't want to live a life like that personally. So I would either do everything in my power to change that, or I would just personally not really want to live anymore. But hey, everyone has their own demons they have to deal with. And whatever your problems are, guys, just focus on being healthy. That's the good thing, right? Just if you can just be healthy, focus on health. Don't be the strongest. Don't be the fastest. Don't be the. You don't have to be any of it. Just focus on just a little bit of activity, a little bit of break a sweat, a little bit of maybe skip the donut every now and then. Honestly, you'll be fine. Like we're humans, we're resilient, but we can't just not take care of our bodies or our cars, basically, ourselves and just vehicles, and expect that we're just going to keep going. It's weird, but I guess when you don't have someone to yell at you, you just give up. I think that that's part of it. And I know that a lot of kids in my high school were so used to athletics basically all year long that as soon as they were out of school, they weren't in athletics anymore. So it just the same thing as like it's harder to meet a partner when you're not in school because you don't have that social background. You don't have that social gathering spot you can constantly go to and meet new people, you know? And Pin Zero, that's another real thing. Like, I love talking about these issues, but I can tell you guys, you know, I have some of the OGs in chat now, people I know I can talk to about this kind of stuff. I don't typically talk about this kind of stuff a lot because I think that people get very sensitive. And I again, this is just my opinion. I don't know, but it seems like people get a little bit even angry, envious, and even kind of like dislike you when you talk about how healthy you like to be and how hard you work today and how you did 10 pull-up. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't help but feel that a lot in nerd communities. And don't get me wrong, I feel the same thing in a jock, quote unquote, athletic community with video games to a certain extent. Like if I'm like MMOs, I love, some people's eyes do kind of gloss over. But on my channel, I'm a public figure. I can't help it. I'm public. You guys watch me, watch my content and stuff. I have things that I'm very passionate about, especially with regards to how you take care of yourself. And the reason being, again, because I've suffered from serious mental problems before, and I have not gotten care. So, meaning I did not have the money or the ability to get the kind of help I needed. So, I had to help myself, basically. And that's why, to me, I'm so like militantly passionate about taking care of. Not because I have like 100% diet. I don't fucking diet, guys. You guys think I diet? I work out as much as I work out, so I don't have to diet at all. Like, am I conscious of what I eat? Yes, but that's not a diet. Not eating garbage isn't the same as, every now and then I eat a donut. You know what I'm saying? Like, for example, I had a hamburger yesterday. Last night, actually. I had a hamburger with some fries. Love hamburgers. Nothing wrong with a hamburger. But do I eat a hamburger every single day? 3 times a day, 2 times a day? Oh. I eat a hamburger like maybe every other day, if that. Right? So I think it's just like I'm trying to find a way to express my perspective without coming across it as elitist. Because the simple truth is I am. Did you guys not know that? We could end the stream right there. Like, did you guys? I'm making sure. Did everyone know that I was elitist or not elitist? Curious, because I'm friendly and I'm polite and all those kinds of things. But when I say elitist, I'm joking a bit. But MMO players are some of the most elitist players ever in the world. Feel free to debate against that. What genre of players is more elitist than MMO players? What genre requires you to have fucking entire add-ons and like libraries of add-ons before you even set foot into the game? That's like an MMO, guys. Like, we're meta as hell. We're super sweaty nerds. We might even be the fullest, sweatiest nerds there is. And so when I say that, I say like, we are pretty hardcore, right? MMOs are hardcore. Well, martial arts is hardcore too. And so is taking care of yourself. Those are pretty hardcore things as well. So yeah, I guess my elitism finds its way into other places too. And to me, elitism is basically just the concept of always expecting the best that you can put out from yourself. It doesn't mean you have to be the best. It doesn't mean everybody has to be the best. It just means that you're basically addicted to the idea of constantly getting better at whatever you're trying to get better at. Now, the negative stigma from the term elitist, I think, comes from when it's exclusionary. But the problem is, guys, life is exclusionary. It is. Elitism is just a normal part of life. It's always been part of life. It's not fair, right? It's not nice or kind when somebody gets picked over the other because they're better. But it's like, kind of just is how life works. You do hate when an elitist is questioning why you don't know something. I hate that too. And that's the thing, is just like, that's who I actually hate. Like, if you want to like rank a list of kinds of people I hate, that kind of person you just mentioned, Limpos, is top of my list. I hate know-it-alls. I hate them. They're annoying, dude. I don't need to know all day how smart you are, right? We can just have a good time. We can talk about smart shit when it comes up. We don't have to always flex how smart you are, right? So yeah, like the pseudo-intellectual kind of like elitist in that perspective, it is really annoying. But is there anything wrong with expecting that you do your best and enjoying doing your best, therefore associating with people who like to do their best? Kind of elitism, right? Like, do we want to go back in history? Hey, we got some Norse people here. Do we want to go back to the Norse people? Do we want to go back to Scandinavian people? Do we got some Danes here? Do we have, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's so many elitist type warrior cultures that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for those people, right? Like, speaking of Greece, everyone loves to think about the Spartans or the Thebes, right? The people of Thebes. Like, do you think that those people would have been great if they weren't elitist? Right? Like, if they didn't have a standard and expectation of what's considered elite. I think elitism is actually very important because we always need to be striving better as a human species. At least that's how I see life. But I think it's just, there's two parts of the story. One, not everybody's going to be able to be a part of the elitist group, right? The elite. So you have to accept that. And second part, just because you aren't or can't doesn't mean that you're somehow a bad person, right? It just means that your skills aren't, particularly geared towards that specific realm. Maybe yet, right? Because it's not like you're just always bad, right? Spartans weren't actually that elite. They were fairly on par with their peers. I mean, that's not at all true. Maybe you mean in terms of like weaponry? Maybe. But like Spartans 100% were everything they're like hyped up to be. They were pretty serious. Now, the difference between I think what you're trying to get at is that they weren't infallible and they didn't win every battle. In fact, the Thebes, who I mentioned, literally beat their asses so bad. The only reason that King Philip, who was uniting Macedon at the point, didn't destroy them was because he grew up in Thebes and respected Spartans as everybody did. But like Limpos is, I get what you're saying from the perspective of, goes back to what we mentioned about the samurai. There is a big mythos surrounding the Spartans, but I've studied them like a lot, dude, and they 100% are like elite. They are elite. In fact, they might be one of the most elite. But that's a problem because their society was so exclusionary. They didn't really let other people into it. And not to mention, they constantly would war against their own people. So I would sit here and say that they were elite soldiers. Were they elite conquerors? No, probably not. They're more like an elite band of soldiers that if you fought out in the open battlefield, we're probably going to beat you no matter what, right? In equal numbers. I think that's seriously how elite they were. The problem with the Spartans are, A, they almost never had equal numbers because they're going up against Persia. And second, they were not really politically supported, which I think somebody mentioned in chat. So Athens was constantly warring against Sparta. So was Thebes. Athens was warring against Thebes as well. And needless to say, the Spartans, although they were definitely great people, in terms of the history of great people and great warriors, I don't think they'll be remembered as the greatest. And I think the simple reason is that the nations that came after them took a lot of what they did and kind of did it better. I'm not going to sit here and say they had the whole creating a warrior aspect as good. Maybe that's debatable because you have to think Spartans, I think, trained for like 20, 25 years of their life. Like something insane. Like it's not normal. It's not. The reason why they had such lax laws about conceiving and having children is because they needed more soldiers, basically, right? They needed more Spartans because they would die all the time, and it was hard to maintain their very elite mentality. The reason why, to go back to Limpos's point about how you can say maybe they weren't the most elite, as an elite troop, combat-wise, absolutely elite. In terms of warfare tactics, more arguable, and if you're going to go further in terms of legacy history, I do not believe you can say the Spartans are one of the most elite forces in history in terms of historical significance, in terms of conquering, in terms of winning battles, in terms of like all of the other things that I guess we would like measure here. But if we're just going to talk about the process of creating soldiers, the process of creating warriors, the process of training them, and creating an elite caste system, then yeah, maybe the Spartans were really good at that. But to explain what I'm trying to say a little bit more, when King Philip came with the Macedons and the Thebes and basically beat up Sparta and conquered the rest of Greece, that was the precursor to Alexander the Great, his son. And Philip was a great soldier, amazing soldier. His son, actually, Alexander, served in wars with him as a cavalryman. And so what ended up being so special about them is basically because they took a lot of what was already good about, Greek history, like the phalanx and Spartans and shit, and they combined it with other stuff, like horses. Macedon had amazing horses, and so they combined the whole cavalry aspect with that. And so the full strength of Greece was never during the time of the Spartans, right? Like, they weren't even the strongest in the Mediterranean. Like, think about that. The Thebes conquered Sparta, and many other nations at that time had won and fought wars against Sparta. And done well. Now, the people themselves, though, is a nation winning a war or a battle mean that the people fighting are necessarily bad or great soldiers? It doesn't, and that's where it's complicated. I think that's why I got so tangential, you guys got me ranting here a little bit, is because tactics and strategy aren't the same thing. They're not. And I guess what I'm trying to say is the strategy was always there, but the tactics started changing as people got more advanced. Philip really advanced tactics, and so did his son, probably the greatest general ever, Alexander the Great. My favorite general, by the way. Yeah, so to fully explain, technically speaking, yeah, the Spartans weren't the strongest thing. Technically, it was the cavalry. They probably killed way more people than the phalanx or the foot soldiers did. But that being said, obviously they're switching from the whole swords and helmets and Corinthian helmets, by the way, and shields and that kind of short sword style, like getting in like shield walls and shit. That was effective, but what brought that to the next level was cavalry with super amazing weaponry and amazing armor. The funny thing is this has become full circle. Because remember when I talked about elitism? The cavalry unit was 100% elitist. In fact, it was so elitist, it was literally only made up of like the best riders and the best soldiers and the highest members in the society. Meaning they had the best education, best tactics, best training, they grew up together basically. A lot of people know this because they know that Alexander went to war with the companions, aka his personal cavalry unit. So yeah, man, it's exactly Huel. The Spartans by Philip's time were already greatly reduced after decades of war, with low replacement as well as just poor diplomacy. Right? It's like, have you ever played Crusader Kings and only tried to war with people? That was Sparta. It's like you gotta trade more. You have to establish your cities. You have to build walls. The Spartans didn't build walls, guys. The reason why it's so funny is the Mediterranean is one of the most warlike regions that we've ever seen, ever. Like, these people have been fighting for thousands of years. And the Spartans, they didn't even build walls. And it's because their argument, as you said, we are the walls. Who's going to invade us? Well, a lot of people did once you guys ran out and your mythos wasn't strong enough to scare people away from going to battle with you. Not to mention, people had gone to battle with Spartans for many years already, so they were already used to them. And the Spartans weren't evolving necessarily, right? That's why Philip was able to conquer them, I think, largely because they didn't evolve. They were in the downswing, and so was Greece as a whole was in the downswing. So it's just ironic because pretty much everybody tries to conquer people in the Mediterranean. And yet the Spartans were like, we're good enough soldiers and people were scared of us, so we'll be good. It's like, no, like, you gotta have walls. First off, the barbarians are coming. Their literary comebacks are amazing, though. Yeah, no, it's absolutely. Spartans are just like playing Endless Legend as necrophages. What is more than just infantry combat? Spartans were more warlike, but it was only citizens, which was true for most Greece at the time, so they weren't entirely unique. Spartans were the walls. Spartans were more warlike, but it was only citizens. Yeah, but not everybody in Sparta was a Spartan, you know? Like, so that, it's like, I kind of see what you're saying, but not everybody would be a Spartan anyway. They had a lot of slaves, actually. And that's why Thebes conquered them. Like, Thebes went and conquered and destroyed Sparta because of the slaves, actually. So, in a way, you're kind of right in that the fact that the slaves weren't integrated as Spartans is probably why Sparta had the most problem. Yeah, there you go. That's the name, Helots. The Thebes went to go basically rescue the Helots. So, yeah, needless to say, the Spartans at that point were so elitist that they basically had nobody fighting for them anymore, which is funny because it's like, I've seen this happen in MMOs before, where you have this big clan, it's like elitist and everything, and it like slowly trickles down to where it's like 10 dudes, and they're still elitist, and it's like, you guys have 10 members. Nobody cares about you guys anymore. Like, you're good players, but nobody cares about y'all. Like, you don't influence the game in any significant way. But it's kind of like they still have that elitism, you know, like, no, it's still only a couple of people can join our. That's kind of it reminds me of the Spartans. But yeah, I think if we're gonna attribute we're gonna attribute something to the Spartans in terms of like what they did the best, I'm going to say it was creating education that led to the creation of warriors that many people copied, by the way. In fact, pretty much all the people from that area started copying. So I'll give them credit for that, but I also have to give Babylonia credit for that as well. So creating education, and then the mythos that followed such thing, I think was probably what you would attribute Sparta the greatest for. But to mention some other warriors, because I know some people in chat right now who don't follow all of this kind of stuff, you're kind of like, what the fuck is it? Like, who else would you rank up there? Mongols. The Huns. Like, have you guys ever heard about them? Those are conquerors. Like, those are insanely successful warriors. Like, people were literally terrified of the Huns. People literally fled. How about, let's go back to the Scots. Let's go back to my people. Okay. You guys know the history of the Romans and the Scots? This is my last story of the day, and then I'm leaving. All right, so Romans, at the peak of their power, were like, let's keep going. And they literally kept conquering all the way up to the islands. So the Romans were up there in Norway. They were up there in Scotland. The Romans were everywhere. And they were trying to conquer it. And so what they did is they go up there. And the first wall, which I don't know if the first is Antoine's or Hadrian's. And so get this. The first wall, the Romans go up there and have, basically they're trying to subjugate the people as they do, and they conquer people. They conquer I think it's called Northumbria and places like there, Wessex, and they conquered a lot of these kingdoms, which were then later conquered by the Norse, by the way, which is another crazy bit of history, how UK got Norsified, and many people in the UK now are probably Norse, which is, by the way, genius, because the Norse people knew that they weren't on top anymore in terms of like the army, the soldiers. But one thing they did that was genius during that time, and I've never seen this done in any way, shape, or form to the same extent, they literally spread their culture on purpose to keep it alive. Isn't that crazy? Like, we don't see a lot of places that do that and did that so purposefully as we did with the people that came from Scandinavia. They very much did. I thought that was very interesting. Anyway, so what I'll say is they go up there. The Romans, literally the greatest like warlike conquering force we had seen at that point. They had the most territory ever in history. I think besides Alexander. And so on and so forth. They get up there, and they were like, we're gonna put a line right here between kind of like south, like North UK, and then like mid UK, and we're gonna call that. I think that was that Hadrian's or Antoine's, the first wall. And so then a lot of wars start happening. It gets sent back over. Rome is Rome the city, but the Romans are a huge empire, right? A bunch of different cultures, a bunch of different people. And so they went back, and at this point, they're fighting against the Germanic tribes. They're fighting against a bunch of different people on the mainlands. And so after a person gets elected into power, they decide, okay, let's go back to the UK. And now, it wasn't the UK back then. And let's conquer those islands. Let's really conquer them. So they went back, they passed the wall that they originally had set, and then they went up. That's a good point, y'all. Alexander did purposely spread Greek culture. And, by the way, Persian culture, whether he knew it or not, which is very interesting to think about. But anyway, so they go up, and at this point, I don't remember the general's name. I think it might have been the Antoine or the Hadrian guy. They go up there, and they try to subjugate the people of Scotland. And so you guys might have heard stories about this, and they're probably exaggerated. It's not as like cool as the Scots were just such great warriors. They made them leave. Come on, guys. These are the Romans. They conquered the Greeks. Mind you, the weak Greeks. They weren't the same Greeks anymore. And the Greeks let them conquer them, to be fair, which is another weird thing about Rome, is a lot of these places willingly conquered because their options are get completely wiped out or join the war horse or the war train. So yeah. basically what happened is the people from Northumbria and those areas fled to North Scotland. So that's why they got there originally. And here's where it gets really interesting. They went all the way up to Inverness and Ross County, which is where my family is from. Now, what's even more interesting is, remember I talked about Orkney and Kirkwall and how it's up there, those islands that are dominated by Norse people? Well, that's when the Norse people and the Scottish people actually first kind of interacted. And so very likely the Picts, the Gaelics, the Norse people breed it all together, which kind of explains why they're similar in so many respects, right? Like there's so many similarities between their cultures. It's because they kind of were like merged together almost by force. Mind you, the Norse people who were there to conquer, of course, and were there to live in the lands. Well, sorry, they weren't there to conquer yet. They didn't come there to conquer until later on. They were there to take advantage of the lands, raid, etc. The conquering came later. The conquering definitely came later. But with Ivar the Boneless and all that kind of shit. Anyway, so the Scots are up there. Why can't they be conquered? Well, they don't have a king. They didn't have a king. They had a moat. You guys ever seen Game of Thrones? You guys know the people of the Isle? The Ironborn? They're literally the Scots. Like, not joking. Like, they're almost exactly the same. They have moats. They vote. People kill each other. Remember, you've heard the story about Macbeth? And how, you know, the British people, aka Shakespeare, thought that was so crazy to kill your own king. Well, that was at a moat. People killed each other all the time in those things. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, it was explained in a totally different context. In a British context. Well, this is weird, look, he's crazy, kill a king, whoa. Like, but when you explain it in Scot, like, you know, context or Gaelic context, it's just like, the better chief won. Like, what are you talking about? You know, it's totally a different background. But yeah, so at this point, Britain has killed a lot of kings. That's for sure. Well, especially after the Norsemen came over. But anyway, so why couldn't they conquer Scotland then if it wasn't just because they were great warriors? Which, by the way, historically, there's no history to say that they were such great warriors that, you know, nothing that people had never seen before. These are the Romans, guys. So why can't the Romans do well? There's a couple reasons. Have you ever been there? Ever seen what the Arctic or wherever the climate is like there? It's Arctic. It's freezing. It's so fucking cold, and like there's like barely anything to block the sun or to block the wind. So like there's some mountains, but they're not very big. So you have to imagine it is insanely hard to live in this place. And these people are not ruled by a king. So how are you supposed to conquer a people who live spread out in a super harsh ass environment who don't live? Yeah, no, I said Arctic. It does get that cold, literally. It's so damn cold there, it can get negative frequently. Especially if you're going up there north, where the islands are, where Kirkwall is. Like, even further up towards Iceland, I mean, you're talking about, like, what is that, like, -10? Or it has to be insanely cold there. And so, the Scottish people, aka they're Gaelics and Picts, by the way, they fled the Romans. They went up and stayed in this really top part. Why else would they stay up there, right? That never gets talked about in history. Why else would they go stay up there? Like, you know the whole Iceland, Greenland story? How come the Scots never got that version of the story? Oh, they left and went up there because they're, you know, afraid of these people conquering them. It's like, that's literally what happened with the Scots. They went up north because they didn't want to get conquered anymore. Ran into the Norse people who weren't really into conquering at the time yet. And were like, hey, let's work together. Next thing you know, Roman people show back up. And yeah, Scots are a little bit more advanced now. And although they still were losing battles, the problem is that Rome spent a year trying to conquer them. It was basically making no headway. So they decided to retreat. But them retreating is not just because Scots were great warriors or because it was harsh lands. It's also because of religion and culture. And it's also because the Scottish people or Gaelic people, their culture does really matter. Like the Greek people have never historically really wanted to be ruled, though they have accepted some ruling by kings and stuff like that before. But they have that in common with the Scots. These are a group of people who have historically not been ruled by a single person and really don't want to be. If you know the history of Scotland, you know that they don't want to be ruled by the king, right? They've been fighting against it for such a long time. Now they're fighting against their independence. The most recent discussion about Scotland actually was British Parliament. They basically said, hey, we're going to open back up in discussions about the vote on Scotland becoming its own country. And with the UK leaving the EU, well, it almost guarantees now that something's going to happen. And I think, personally, and Scotland tweeted at United Nations, I'm pretty sure, by the way, and also the European Union, is that what it's called? The European Union? They messaged them or did some kind of meme where it was basically like, hey, how's it going? Which kind of implies that they're trying to look at potentially becoming separate again. So anyway, that's like a super complex topic we don't even have the time to possibly get into. But yeah, when it comes to warring people, we talked about Spartans, different groups of people and all this. It's like the Norse people, Scots. Things are almost always more complex than you see. Like when you read and see a battle and you hear about a battle in these nations, it's almost always way more complex and cool even. And that's the sad thing about history is there is so much of it. So that the sad thing about that is that it makes it hard for people to follow and find relevancy in it. But the cool thing about history is that when you do actually take the time to look into things, the stories are almost always better than what you originally thought. And so like the story of Norse mythology, for example, and Norse ideals being spread is far more interesting than the story of Vikings, personally. Because they're one and one in some ways, but it's a lot more nuanced to talk about the spread of culture, right? Versus just like raided people and like we had ships and shit and like they couldn't catch us, basically. Like, you know, that's what most people are interested in when it comes to the story. Is this some long way of saying tribal warfare is better than faction warfare? Tribe warfare, actually, because it makes combat more consistent. Let's see. Let me see if that analogy works. Tribe warfare is better than faction warfare because it makes combat more consistent. You know what? Probably is, dude. You're probably right. Look, my example of this is look at the island that is now, or the area that is now known as Norway and Sweden. Look at that entire area, and then go look at Ireland and look at Scotland in the 800s to the 1000s. There's like so many nations. It's like so confusing. Like, yeah, there's way more war and way more battles happening when there are a bunch of tribes. I agree. Which kind of, I'm not going to get derailed again, but why the hell haven't we made a tribal MMO yet? Like, I know guilds are guilds. They're kind of tribal, but let's go all out. Let's make it even more tribal. You mean to say that our legacy of being plundering savages is not great? Not just plundering savages, plundering, raping, murdering savages. Yeah, maybe that's not your only, like, contribution in history. At least that's what I'm inclined to believe. It's like, I mean, if we're gonna go down that route, my people ain't any better on the other side of the world. The Aztecs were literally sacrificing their slaves that they captured with their non-lethal weaponry that they specifically cultivated so they could capture people, so they could specifically sacrifice them. Yeah. My people are kind of freaking insane. And I'm really happy to be able to say that my great-grandpa was Aztec, and I could see it in him. Boy, was he dark as hell. He just had a different nature about him, too. You could tell he had just been so much shit, you know? But I never really got to talk to him about stories. He didn't know that much about his history. Obviously, kind of hard to follow that if you don't have any records and stuff. We had some great times in the 1500s until mother clocking Sweden and England put a stop to that. My final question for you, Limpos, because I know you might know, but I don't. What's the relation of Upland and Smallland to Sweden, Denmark, and Norway? I haven't looked into it yet. I know those nations kind of came from before, but like, can you explain, I guess, a bit of like, you know anything about that history? Like, I don't know if it's something they all learn in fucking school or some shit. Like, I'm curious about Upland, Smallland, like that area right there that before it became Sweden, Norway, Denmark, like some of the friendly antagonism. That's the confusing thing, is because like when you play Crusader Kings, it seems like your buddies 1 second, and then you're like warring against their buddy the next second. It's like man, like the political landscape in that area is so freaking like at that time. It's like nuts. Anyway, Crusader Kings is a great game. Go play that game. See you guys later. I'm out for real. We did 3 hours and 45 minutes of us just shooting the shit, so that was fun. In the past, it was just a mess of power struggles. Ah, okay. Was anyone ever really trying to unite? You know, Scandinavia? Was that ever a thing? Was there ever an Alexander the Great? Was there ever a Darius II, for example? I'm curious. I mean, I guess Ivor the Boneless kind of did go and try and conquer all of the Isles. But I don't think that counts. And he was pretty murderous. The Kalmar Union. Okay, I'll look into that, but I'll look into it off stream. All right, see you guys later. Peace out.